What if the way you make decisions, form relationships, or even react to stress isn't just human, but echoes patterns found in the wild? Prepare to have your mind blown as we unveil 100 hidden connections between the natural world and our own fascinating, often baffling, behavior. You'll never look at a flock of birds or a ripple in a pond the same way again. Let's start with Level 1. Imagine a seashell resting quietly in your hand. Its surface is cool, curved, and lined with delicate ridges that flow in an elegant spiral. This spiral is not random. It follows a pattern, the same pattern seen in sunflowers, pine cones, and even galaxies far beyond our skies. The seashell grows by adding new chambers, each turn looping outward from the center, yet never breaking away from its beginning. In this way, a shell is both a home and a timeline, an unfolding record of life written in shape rather than words. The people of ancient coastlines often gathered such shells, not only for food but also for meaning. In some traditions, spirals were carved into stone or painted onto pottery, echoing the seashell's curve. They saw in these spirals a reflection of human life itself, growth that feels continuous, yet bound by repeating cycles. You rise with the sun, you labor, you rest, and then you rise again. Just as the mollusk builds chamber upon chamber, people built their days, their habits, their memories, always looping, never fully escaping the pattern. Imagine yourself walking along a shore at dusk. Each shell scattered in the sand carries its own story, its own spiral of time. Some are broken, revealing the chambers within, like a glimpse into a secret history. Others remain whole, smooth, and perfect, hiding the quiet architecture of growth inside. To hold such a shell is to hold a paradox, the sense of endless expansion contained within something so small, so fragile. And still, there is comfort in this spiral. It suggests that life, even in its repetition, has direction. That though we circle back to familiar struggles or familiar joys, we are always moving outward, slowly expanding, tracing a path we cannot always see, but one that carries us further along the shore of our own becoming. On a quiet afternoon, you may notice a flock of starlings sweeping across the sky. They twist and bend as one, thousands of wings beating in seamless unison. There is no leader to signal the change, no obvious command passed from one bird to the next, and yet the entire group pivots in perfect harmony. This motion, called a murmuration, is more than a natural spectacle. It is a mystery of coordination that has fascinated observers for centuries. Long before modern science, such sudden turns were interpreted as omens. Ancient Romans read patterns in flocks of birds, believing they revealed the will of the gods. Farmers, too, watched them closely, seeing in their movements signs of seasonal shifts, the coming of storms, or the subtle changes in air pressure. The rhythm of daily life often leaned on such silent messengers, guiding planting and harvest, travel and trade. Centuries later, naturalists tried to capture the phenomenon with words and sketches. They described the birds as waves, as smoke, as cloth rippling in the wind. Still, none could explain how so many creatures, each with its own mind, could behave as a single living fabric. It was not until the late 20th century that scientists proposed models, rules of alignment, attraction, and separation, simple instructions followed by each bird that together create complex and fluid forms. And here lies the echo with human life. Crowds in marketplaces, congregations in churches, or gatherings in public squares often move with similar currents. A rumor, a shift in mood, a sudden burst of energy, all can sweep through people without a single word spoken, binding them into a collective turn. Whether bird or human, these patterns remind us that we are never entirely separate. We move not only as individuals but also as parts of a larger whole, carried by invisible threads of awareness. Beneath the forest floor lies a world most travelers never see. Roots stretch outward in quiet determination, weaving through the soil, thick with the scent of damp earth. Some belong to trees hundreds of years old, their foundations reaching as far beneath the surface as their branches reach into the sky. Yet, these roots are not alone. Entangled with them are threads of fungi, delicate, silver-like strands forming what scientists call the mycorrhizal network. Through these hidden pathways, trees share water, minerals, and even warnings. A sapling shaded by towering elders may receive sugars from those who have already captured the sun. When insects gnaw at leaves, chemical messages can travel through these underground corridors, prompting neighbors to strengthen their defenses. What looks, above ground, like a silent grove of individual trunks is in truth a community, linked, communicating, and sustaining one another. For centuries, people believed trees competed ruthlessly for light and soil. Only recently has research revealed this quieter story of cooperation, one in which strength is measured not in isolation, but in connection. Ancient forests, untouched for generations, often thrive because their networks remain intact, undisturbed by human clearing or disruption. There is something humbling in this hidden order. Families of trees, bound together by unseen threads, resemble the bonds of human kinship. Parents feeding children, siblings sharing burdens, elders lending their reserves of strength. The forest is not only a collection of individuals but an extended family whose lives rise and fall together. When you walk through such a place, the air cool and the ground soft beneath your steps, you may sense this unity. Every rustle, every root, every whisper of wind is part of a conversation older than memory. And though you cannot hear it, the forest remembers. Along the shore, the sea follows a rhythm older than memory. Tides rise and fall, each wave pulling away only to return again. For fishermen in ancient Greece, this rhythm shaped their days. Nets were lowered at dawn when the tide retreated, and boats pushed out with the returning swell. Their lives followed the sea's steady pulse, a cycle of work and rest bound to the lunar pull that they could neither resist nor control. In medieval Europe, monasteries were often built close to the water. Monks spoke of tides as the breath of the earth, inhaling and exhaling through the coastline. They measured not only the hours of prayer but also the shifting boundary of land and sea. Some even recorded strange events when tides failed to behave, an omen, they thought, of unrest in heaven. The waves were not just water in motion, but signs, whispers of something greater shaping the world. Far across the oceans, in Polynesia, navigators studied waves with extraordinary skill. Without compasses or maps, they read the swell, the direction of currents, and the rhythm of water striking their canoes. For them, the sea was a living map, where the beat of waves revealed hidden islands far beyond the horizon. To move across thousands of miles of open ocean, they listened to the sea's pattern as carefully as one listens to a drum. Today, standing at a beach, the rhythm is still there. The crash and retreat, the endless repetition, feels both calming and inevitable. Scientists tell us that tides are governed by gravity, the moon's pull mirrored by the sun's. Yet even with equations and charts, the experience is more than calculation. The sound of waves has accompanied us for as long as humans have walked the shore. To hear them is to be reminded of the cycles within ourselves, of effort and rest, of stress and release. Just as the sea returns again and again, so too do we find balance in the rhythm of our own lives. Imagine standing at the edge of a meadow in late summer, where the air hums with the low, steady vibration of bees. Their golden bodies move in and out of the hive with a rhythm that feels both chaotic and precise. To the untrained eye, it seems like simple busyness. Yet within the dark, waxy chambers of the hive, an intricate form of language unfolds, one without sound, but full of meaning. For centuries, humans wondered how bees could leave the hive, travel miles across fields and forests, and still return to guide others to flowers hidden far beyond sight. The answer came in the 20th century, when Austrian scientist Karl von Frisch carefully observed their movements. He discovered what came to be called the waggle dance. When a bee finds nectar, she returns home and performs a looping pattern, her body vibrating in subtle pulses. The angle of her dance indicates direction in relation to the sun, while the tempo reveals distance. In a dim hive, lit only by the faint reflections of wax and wing, her companions interpret this moving map. This is not communication in words, nor in gestures we easily recognize, yet it mirrors something deeply human. Consider how people, too, rely on movement to bridge silence. A raised hand can signal caution, a subtle nod agreement, a pointed finger direction. Just as we shape meaning through shared signs, bees create a silent symphony of orientation and survival. The dance is more than instruction. It is trust embodied in movement. Each bee depends on the accuracy of another's steps, just as communities rely on the subtle cues of leaders, parents, or friends. When you imagine the hive, think not of a rigid system, but of a flowing conversation, spoken in circles and angles, carried on wings. And so, the meadow outside is not just buzzing with sound. It is alive with invisible maps, encoded pathways, and a choreography as old as flowers themselves. The hive, in its quiet dance, reminds us that meaning does not always need words. It can live in motion, in patterns, in trust passed from one to another. Imagine the quiet persistence of a herd moving across open plains. Hooves press into the earth, leaving faint tracks that are soon erased by wind, yet the path itself is remembered, not by maps or written records, but by instinct. Year after year, the same routes are followed, as though invisible lines stretch across the continents, binding creatures to places far apart. The Arctic tern, a small white bird, travels from pole to pole, tracing a journey longer than any human migration. Caribou sweep across tundra in vast herds, following trails their ancestors walked for centuries. Sea turtles return to the same beaches where they first hatched, guided by a memory that seems older than their own lives. Each movement is a rhythm of survival, a pattern etched into bodies and carried across generations. For people, too, there are rituals that echo these migrations. Farmers rise each spring to till the soil, communities gather each year for harvest, families reunite when seasons turn. Imagine yourself observing these repetitions from afar, lights glowing in the same windows year after year, footsteps climbing the same stairways, ceremonies unfolding in the same words and gestures. Like the animals, we retrace our routes, sometimes across miles, sometimes only across the boundaries of daily habit. The migration path is both necessity and comfort. It ensures survival, but it also creates belonging. To move with others along a shared route is to know that you are not alone, that your steps follow those who came before, and that others will follow after. There is mystery in this repetition, a quiet sense that time does not move in straight lines but in cycles, folding back on itself like wings crossing the sky. And so, as you imagine the distant herds, the circling birds, or the returning turtles, you may sense in their endless journeys a reflection of your own. Each year may seem familiar, yet each turn carries you forward, along paths that are both ancient and entirely your own. Across the natural world, there is a silent ritual that unfolds before violence. A predator meets the eyes of its prey. For a brief moment, nothing moves. The muscles of the hunter tighten, the body of the hunted trembles, and between them passes a gaze that feels almost like recognition. To look into another's eyes is to see a mirror, however fleeting, of one's own existence. In daily life, this exchange is softened but never lost. People, too, test one another with their gaze. In crowded markets of ancient cities, merchants measured trust not in words but in the steadiness of a buyer's eyes. In the courts of kings, ambassadors learned that the failure to hold a ruler's gaze could be taken as weakness, or worse, deceit. And in the quieter spaces of ordinary homes, even children sense the unspoken truth. The eyes reveal more than the tongue dares to say. Cultures across time placed unusual weight on this invisible thread. Samurai in medieval Japan wrote of the battle of the eyes that began long before swords were drawn. Among the Romans, orators trained themselves to command an audience with a single sweeping look, holding the crowd not with force but with presence. In these practices, the gaze was more than vision. It was a test of will, a crossing of invisible boundaries. Science now suggests that our nervous systems respond to eye contact in subtle ways. Heart rates quicken, chemical signals shift, and the brain sharpens its awareness. Perhaps this is why predators and prey alike are bound in that tense moment before the strike. The eye is not simply an organ of sight, it is a portal of intention, a mirror reflecting both courage and fear. When two gazes meet, the world narrows to a silent corridor. For some, it is a path to connection. For others, it is a prelude to conflict. Yet in either case, the eyes remind us that awareness itself is never solitary. To be seen is to exist, and to meet the gaze of another is to step into the mystery of being known. Across the world, there is a moment that repeats with remarkable consistency. Just before a storm arrives, birds fall quiet. Their songs cease, wings fold, and they vanish into sheltered spaces. The forest that only minutes before rang with the calls of sparrows and crows becomes subdued, as though holding its breath. Even insects soften their hum. What remains is a silence that carries a different weight from ordinary quiet, a pause that seems to anticipate what has not yet come. This stillness has long been noticed by those who lived close to the land. Farmers once read it as a natural warning, a cue to gather tools and retreat indoors. Sailors on open seas would note when gulls disappeared from the air, recognizing that the wind would soon turn. Today, science provides an explanation. Shifts in barometric pressure and humidity disturb the delicate balance of animal senses. Birds detect the subtle change and conserve energy, withdrawing from the sky to wait out the turbulence. Yet this silence is not only physical. It lingers in memory as something deeply human. Before moments of conflict or decisions that alter lives, people too fall into hush. Words falter at thresholds, before battles, before farewells, before the uncertain crossing into a new chapter. The instinct to pause, to draw inward, mirrors the natural world's rhythm. Like birds before thunder, we retreat into stillness to brace ourselves. Literature and history are filled with accounts of these suspended moments. Ancient chronicles describe cities gone unnaturally quiet before invasion. In diaries, writers record the oppressive calm before revolutions erupted. Time itself seems to slow in these intervals, as if the world hesitates on the edge of change. When the storm does arrive, whether of weather or of circumstance, the silence is broken. Thunder cracks, rain falls, voices rise. But the memory of that still pause remains, reminding us that anticipation can be as profound as the event itself. In silence, life gathers itself, waiting for the surge of what must follow. In the frozen forests of Eurasia, wolves move together as if guided by a silent agreement. Each member has a place, yet no chart or decree fixes it. The order is shaped through action, through who dares to step forward at the hunt, who holds back when challenged, who lingers at the edge. A hierarchy forms not by force alone, but by patience, endurance, and the quiet recognition of the group. Early observers once believed the strongest wolf always ruled, an iron-fisted alpha dominating the rest. But research in the 20th century revealed something gentler and far more complex. In the wild, the leader is often apparent, guiding rather than commanding. The pack follows because trust has been earned, not seized. Pups watch carefully, imitating the rhythm of their elders' steps, and soon the structure of the group becomes less about dominance and more about belonging. For nomadic peoples who lived alongside wolves, this pattern did not go unnoticed. Hunters in Siberia spoke of wolves as teachers, embodying the strength of the collective. They saw in the pack's balance a lesson for their own camps, where survival required cooperation as much as courage. A leader who fed the group was stronger than one who ruled with fear. The animal's quiet discipline became a mirror for human society. Even now, when wolves are tracked by biologists in Yellowstone or the Carpathians, their movements remind us of our own unspoken hierarchies. In workplaces, families, and crowds, influence often flows not from the loudest voice but from the one who acts with calm persistence. Just as the pack senses who will guide the next hunt, we, too, often follow without words. The pattern is ancient, yet still alive, leadership as a rhythm felt rather than declared. Imagine yourself sitting beneath a tall tree on a quiet afternoon. The air is still, yet above you the leaves seem alive with small movements, subtle shifts, delicate turns, as if each one is listening to the light. This motion is not random. It is part of a slow, unspoken dance called phototropism, the way leaves adjust themselves to capture the sun. For the tree, this is survival. Each leaf angles itself to gather just enough light for photosynthesis, the quiet process of turning sunlight into energy. Over time, this movement shapes the canopy itself, spreading wide, layering in patterns that resemble waves or fans. If you watch long enough, you can almost sense intention, though it is only biology at work. Yet biology often feels like poetry. Scientists in the 19th century studied these subtle movements, tracking how stems and leaves bent toward lamps in controlled experiments. Charles Darwin himself wrote about them in his work on plant behavior, noting that even the smallest seedlings seemed to possess a kind of silent awareness, stretching, leaning, adjusting, as though guided by an invisible hand. In this slow choreography, there is something familiar. Humans, too, bend toward what sustains them. A face tilts toward warmth, a body leans toward comfort, a heart gravitates to whatever resembles hope. Just as leaves seek the light, we find ourselves pulled by forces we do not always name, toward companionship, toward meaning, toward the quiet assurance of belonging. The canopy above becomes a mirror of this truth. Each leaf, no matter how small, contributes to the larger harmony of the tree. Together, they weave a shelter of shade, a green roof that cools and protects. In much the same way, human lives form patterns within communities. Each choice, each gesture, leaning toward light, joining with others to create something larger than the self. So when you next see a leaf turning gently in the breeze, imagine it not only as part of a tree, but as part of a wider metaphor, a reminder that reaching for light, in whatever form it takes, is an instinct shared across all living things. Imagine the year unfolding like a slow circle drawn in the sky. Spring begins the arc, when the earth softens and green pushes through soil that seemed lifeless only weeks before. The air carries the scent of rain and blossoms, and with it, a quiet stirring in you as well, an invitation to begin again, to move outward after months of stillness. Summer follows with long days and abundant light. Fields are heavy with grain, rivers run full, and evenings stretch late into warmth. People rise earlier, work longer, and linger outside as though time itself has grown generous. Imagine yourself in that fullness, when even the smallest routines feel easier beneath the steady rhythm of the sun. Then autumn arrives, and the world leans back toward shadow. Leaves drift to the ground, crops are gathered, and the air sharpens with change. The circle turns inward. You may find yourself reflecting more often, storing memories as one might store grain, preparing for what lies ahead. In many cultures, autumn was the season of gathering not just food, but stories, when communities came together to share and to remember. Winter closes the circle. Days are short, nights long, and the earth grows silent beneath frost. To some, this quiet feels heavy, but to others it is a time of rest, of deeper thought, of waiting. Imagine yourself beside a fire or beneath a blanket, listening to the stillness outside. In that stillness lies renewal, the unseen preparation for another spring. And so the seasons return, again and again. Spring, summer, autumn, winter, each carries its own mood, and in their rhythm we find the rhythm of our own lives. Just as the earth does not resist the turning, neither do we fully escape it. We rise, we flourish, we gather, we rest. The circle continues, not to trap us, but to remind us that life itself is a pattern, endless, repeating, and always moving quietly forward. At dawn, when the air is still heavy with dew, the web of a spider glimmers like a suspended net of light. Each thread seems delicate, almost invisible, yet together they form a structure of remarkable strength. The secret lies not only in the silk itself, but in the tension held between strands, each line balanced against the pull of the others. Remove one, and the harmony falters. Leave them all, and the web endures wind, rain, and the weight of life caught within. Human bonds resemble this fragile architecture. Families, friendships, communities. All are woven from threads of trust and expectation. Like the spider's silk, they can stretch under pressure, but if pulled too sharply, they may break without sound. In ancient villages, survival often depended on such invisible ties. One family shared grain with another during famine, knowing that the favor would return when needed most. The rhythm of life relied not only on the strength of the individual but on the tension carefully maintained between people. Across history, entire societies have mirrored the geometry of a web. Monarchs and emperors placed themselves at the center, with threads of loyalty radiating outward through courtiers, soldiers, and common folk. A break in one strand, a betrayal, a rebellion, an unkept promise, sent vibrations rippling across the whole. The collapse of empires often began not with armies at the gates but with the quiet snapping of trust within. Science, too, finds resonance here. A spider senses the faintest quiver on its web, the tremor of a fly's wing or the shift of a breeze. Humans, though less aware, still feel the subtle pull of connection. A word withheld, a glance averted, an unspoken disappointment, all are vibrations along the threads we share. To live, then, is to weave and to be woven. The web is never permanent. It must be repaired, rebuilt, renewed. In its fragile brilliance, the spider's web reminds us of our own bonds, easily broken, endlessly necessary, and always shimmering in the light of connection. Far beyond the reach of the naked eye, galaxies drift in silence. Many of them take the form of spirals, vast, rotating arms of stars, dust, and gas stretching outward from a dense center. These spirals are not hurried. Their revolutions take millions of years, too slow to witness in a single lifetime. Yet from the perspective of deep time, they appear almost like cosmic whirlpools, graceful and steady, shaping the structure of the universe itself. Each arm is a pathway of birth and death. Stars ignite, shine, and collapse within them, leaving behind remnants that seed the next generation of light. This cycle of emergence and fading mirrors the patterns of civilizations on Earth. Empires expand across continents, weaving networks of trade and culture, only to fragment and dissolve. From their ruins, new societies gather strength, just as new stars form from the remnants of those that came before. Astronomers studying spiral galaxies notice how order emerges from chaos. Gravity holds the arms together, balancing creation and collapse in an intricate dance. In human history, too, forces of cohesion and disintegration have shaped the rhythm of lives, periods of flourishing followed by times of retreat. The fall of Rome, the rise of the Abbasid Caliphate, the cycles of dynasties in China, all can be seen as echoes of the spiral, turning outward, then folding inward again. The paradox lies in repetition without true return. No galaxy ever forms the exact same pattern twice. No civilization ever rises in precisely the same way. The spiral suggests continuity, but also change, each loop carrying traces of what came before, while moving into the unknown. When you look up at the night sky, the faint haze of the Milky Way is a reminder that you are already inside such a spiral. Its arms extend beyond sight, holding both the memory of countless ancient stars and the promise of worlds yet unformed. Like civilizations, like lives, galaxies keep turning, quietly repeating the story of expansion, collapse, and beginning again. In the tall grasses of the savanna, a lion crouches low. Hours may pass without movement, its golden body blending with the earth. The hunt begins not with a chase, but with stillness. Muscles tighten, eyes narrow, and silence stretches across the landscape. The moment of waiting is as important as the leap that follows. Without patience, the hunt would fail before it began. For ancient farmers who lived near wild cats, this patience became both fear and fascination. Egyptian scribes carved scenes of lions lying in wait, guardians of desert thresholds, embodying the tension between calm and ferocity. In India, tigers were revered in temple art for the same quality, the ability to remain hidden until the precise moment of action. People saw in the animals' paws a reflection of their own choices, those moments when silence carried more weight than speech. Medieval hunters in Europe tried to imitate this strategy. Manuals on falconry and tracking reminded nobles that to pursue prey was to master stillness. Even a snapped twig could undo hours of effort. So the patience of cats became a lesson not only for survival but for discipline, a rhythm of restraint followed by sudden resolve. Modern biologists study this same pause with careful instruments, measuring the way a cheetah's heart slows before it launches. The body itself prepares, conserving energy until release. To watch such creatures is to be reminded of the pauses in our own lives, the long moments before decisive words, the silence before action, the space in which choice gathers strength. The predator's patience is not only an instinct of survival, it is also a rhythm, echoing the balance between waiting and moving that shapes every life. Imagine a wide plain at dawn. Antelope graze in the cool air, their movements quiet and unhurried. Then, with almost no warning, one among them startles, ears flicking, muscles tensing. In less than a breath, the entire herd surges forward. Dust rises, hooves thunder, and a wave of motion sweeps across the land. This is the stampede, a sudden, collective response born from fear. For the animals, hesitation can mean death. A single predator, hidden in tall grass, is enough to send dozens or even hundreds into motion. Scientists studying herd behavior note how quickly signals of alarm travel. It is not through language, but through the subtle cues of bodies, the flick of a tail, the tightening of posture, the first sprint that pulls others along. Fear moves faster than thought, binding individuals into one body of flight. Humans, though living far from the savannah, know this rhythm as well. In crowded marketplaces of history, a rumor of danger could ripple through a throng, scattering people in every direction. In financial markets, panic often spreads in the same way. One trader sells, another follows, and soon the whole system trembles with the echo of fear. Mobs, too, can shift from calm gathering to sudden chaos in a single breath, not unlike the antelope herd startled into motion. What makes this parallel striking is the absence of certainty. Often, the predator does not strike, the threat does not materialize, the rumor proves false. Yet the stampede happens all the same. The body reacts before the mind, trusting the wisdom of the collective or the pressure of it. In this way, both animals and humans reveal an ancient instinct, to follow movement, to match fear with fear, to find safety in numbers even when none exists. And when the dust settles, the plain grows quiet again. The herd returns to grazing, as if nothing had happened. Much like people after a wave of panic, the calm resumes, though an invisible memory lingers, the knowledge that stillness can turn to chaos in a single step. Imagine a field at the edge of night, still covered in shadows. The air is cool, damp with dew, and all seems quiet. Then, as the horizon brightens, the first petals begin to move. A flower unfolds slowly, its shape opening to the light as though answering a call. This unfolding is not random. It follows a rhythm as old as the turning of the earth, a cycle of light and darkness that governs not only flowers, but life itself. In the past, people watched these timings with care. Certain blossoms would open in the morning, others only at midday, some waiting until dusk. The Swedish naturalist Carl Linnaeus even imagined a flower clock, a garden planted with species so precise in their opening and closing that one could tell the hour simply by observing them. Imagine yourself in such a garden, where time is measured not by bells or machines, but by the quiet discipline of petals rising and folding with the sun. For humans, too, there are moments of opening. We wait, often unconsciously, for the right conditions, the warmth of encouragement, the presence of others, or the stillness of solitude. Just as the flower will not force its bloom before dawn, we too hold back parts of ourselves until the world feels ready to receive them. And when we do open, the moment can feel both inevitable and fragile, like a single blossom that might last only a day. The bloom's timing reminds us that revelation is not constant. It comes in pulses, in seasons, in carefully chosen hours. To live is to wait for these openings, to trust that when the moment arrives, we will know it. And as the petals turn toward light, so too do we, drawn outward not in haste, but in quiet recognition of the chance to be seen, if only for a little while. Follow the course of a river, and you will see how it rarely runs straight. Its waters curve, arc, and bend, shaping themselves around stone and soil. A fallen tree does not halt its movement, a mountain does not end its flow. The river adapts, finding a path of least resistance, wearing down what seems unmovable over long stretches of time. What appears soft and yielding is, in truth, a force that reshapes landscapes. Human will has always mirrored this quiet persistence. Across cultures and centuries, obstacles have arisen: political borders, strict traditions, sudden calamities. Yet people adapt. A family displaced by flood rebuilds on higher ground. Merchants reroute their caravans when old roads are blocked. Pilgrims alter their journeys to honor sacred sites hidden behind guarded walls. The rhythm of survival has never been rigid. It bends, much like water, to continue forward. Ancient civilizations placed deep reverence in rivers. The Nile, the Ganges, the Tigris, they were not only lifelines of sustenance but teachers of patience and resilience. In Egyptian texts, the annual flood was seen as both destruction and renewal, a reminder that life bends in cycles rather than straight lines. In China, poets compared the wandering of rivers to the course of human destiny, finding comfort in the way water eventually reaches the sea despite every diversion. Science, too, observes this paradox. Hydrologists map the meander of rivers and note that bends are not random but patterned, a geometry of flow and resistance repeating itself across continents. Similarly, psychologists describe how people bend their choices under pressure, adjusting goals and expectations to survive. Neither river nor human will is unyielding, yet both achieve endurance through their flexibility. In the end, the bend does not weaken the river, it defines it. Its curves hold memory, history, and the mark of every obstacle overcome. And so it is with us. Each turn we take is not a detour, but the shape of our journey itself. On a summer morning, the ground comes alive with movement. Ants spill from narrow openings in the soil, forming lines that stretch farther than the eye can follow. Each one carries a fragment: crumbs of food, leaves cut into neat green shards, or grains of soil removed to expand the colony's chambers. Their bodies, so small when seen in isolation, gain a sense of immensity when multiplied into thousands, all moving in silent coordination. The march of ants is steady, repetitive, and seemingly endless. Along invisible chemical trails, they follow one another without hesitation, each footstep aligned with a purpose greater than the individual. To watch them is to see a society without pause. Workers leaving, workers returning, the pattern unbroken. There is no commander visible, yet order prevails. The colony functions as a single organism, every ant both insignificant and essential. Human life reflects a similar rhythm. At dawn, streets fill with commuters walking, cycling, driving, or crowding into trains. The flow resembles the ant line. Individuals bound into a collective movement, repeating the same routes day after day. Just as ants devote their labor to sustaining the colony, people give their energy to structures larger than themselves: companies, cities, nations. The repetition can feel mechanical, yet it ensures continuity, stability, and growth. Naturalists have long marveled at the resilience of ant societies. Colonies can persist for decades, sometimes outliving the individual ants by generations. In history, human civilizations, too, have endured because of such collective effort. Roads laid stone by stone, harvests gathered season by season, cities built brick by brick, all resemble the endless march of workers who may never see the final form of what they sustain. The paradox is that within monotony lies survival. What seems repetitive is, in truth, the foundation of progress. Ants march endlessly not because they seek variety, but because continuity sustains life. And so, beneath our own daily rituals, there may be an echo of the same enduring wisdom. That persistence, repeated across countless small acts, builds the unseen strength of a society. In the quiet hours of night, when the forest seems sealed in darkness, owls open their eyes to a different world. Their vision is shaped not for daylight clarity but for shadows, able to catch the faintest glimmer of movement beneath the trees. While we stumble in uncertainty, the owl follows a steady path, guided by senses beyond our reach. The stillness of its watch is broken only by the soundless sweep of wings. Ancient peoples noticed this gift and wove it into their stories. In Greece, the owl was linked to Athena, the goddess of wisdom. It was not the bird's strength but its vision through the unknown that made it sacred. In Native American traditions, owls often carried more complex meanings, sometimes wisdom, sometimes warning, embodying the sense that to see in the dark was both power and burden. The bird was a reminder that not all knowledge comes in daylight, and not all truths are easily spoken. Medieval scribes described owls perched on church towers, watching villages as lanterns flickered below. To them, the bird was both outcast and sage, dwelling apart from human life yet witnessing what others could not. Its unblinking gaze suggested insight into mysteries hidden from ordinary eyes. Today, biologists explain the owl's vision with detail. The large eyes that gather scarce light, the dense feathers that muffle every beat of the wing, the ability to turn its head almost fully around. Yet even with science, the image remains compelling. To watch an owl glide silently through the dark is to feel that some creatures are shaped for uncertainty itself. And so the owl becomes a mirror for our own inner life. When the path ahead feels unclear, we rely on something quieter than reason, a kind of intuition, a sense that guides us through the unseen. Just as the owl sees where we cannot, so too can we move forward, trusting the vision that grows strongest in the dark. Imagine a caterpillar, having spent its days feeding among green leaves, suddenly becoming still. It attaches itself to a branch, weaves a delicate casing, and disappears into darkness. This is the chrysalis, a pause between what was and what will be. Inside, the body softens, breaks down, and reforms in ways invisible to the outside world. To human eyes, it looks like silence. Yet within, an unseen transformation quietly begins. For centuries, people regarded this process with awe. Early observers described it as death followed by rebirth, unable to explain how a creeping creature could dissolve and re-emerge as something winged. Even now, the science feels almost mystical. Enzymes break down the caterpillar's tissues into a kind of cellular soup. From that suspension, new structures form. Wings, antennae, a body designed for flight. What looks like stillness is, in truth, intense creation hidden from view. There is something profoundly human in this rhythm. We, too, retreat into periods of stillness when life unravels, through loss, through grief, through moments of change too heavy to bear in the open. To others, it may look like quiet, even emptiness. But within, the slow work of renewal unfolds. Memories dissolve, patterns shift, new understandings begin to take shape. Like the caterpillar, we emerge altered, though the process cannot be rushed or easily explained. Cultures across the world have drawn meaning from this metamorphosis. Some see it as a symbol of resurrection, others as proof that endings hold beginnings within them. The chrysalis becomes more than a stage of biology. It becomes a metaphor for the human need to pause, to let darkness do its work, to allow time and silence to reshape us. So when you think of a chrysalis, do not see only the stillness. Imagine instead the quiet labor of becoming, hidden, necessary, and full of promise. For in the pause, whether in the branch's shadow or in the depths of grief, lies the possibility of wings. Imagine walking through a shaded forest where the air is damp and cool. Along the ground and clinging to rocks, ferns spread in quiet abundance. At first glance, each frond seems simple, just a green feather against the earth. But look closer, and you notice a pattern repeating itself. The frond is made of smaller fronds, each one a miniature echo of the whole. This is the fern's fractal design, endlessly self-similar, yet never perfectly the same. Long before the language of mathematics described fractals, people sensed this repetition in nature. Ancient carvings, tapestries, and even architectural designs often mimicked fern-like spirals and branching. The pattern was both practical and symbolic, a reminder that small things can carry the shape of larger truths. Imagine yourself tracing one of these fronds with your finger, each leaflet leading you deeper into the same design, as though walking a path that loops back yet always moves forward. In human life, too, there are fractals. A single gesture, the way someone folds their hands, or the tone in which they speak a simple phrase, can reveal something of their entire nature. Just as the fern's smallest leaflet reflects the form of the whole plant, our smallest habits often mirror the deeper shape of who we are. The pattern may not be obvious at first, but over time, it reveals itself with quiet persistence. The fractal of ferns suggests that personality, like nature, is not built from random fragments. It unfolds in repetition, in details that carry the essence of the whole. To notice this is to see continuity where we once saw only scattered moments. And as you imagine the fern's delicate green unfurling, you may feel that same rhythm within yourself, an unfolding of patterns, familiar yet infinite, a quiet echo of the larger design you are part of. When snow drifts gently from the sky, each flake seems like a fragment of silence made visible. Held in your hand for only a breath before melting, the snowflake reveals a pattern at once delicate and exact. 6 arms radiate outward, each reflecting the others with mathematical precision. Yet within this order lies infinite variety. No 2 flakes are alike, though all are bound by symmetry. Human life reflects a similar paradox. In crowded cities or quiet villages, every individual carries a unique history, yet shares the same essential frame. 2 strangers may be shaped by distant landscapes, speak in different tongues, and dream separate dreams, and still their faces echo familiar features, their hearts beat to the same rhythm. Like snowflakes, we are patterned beings, singular, but not separate. Cultures across time have marveled at this harmony of difference. In medieval Europe, snow was sometimes called the blossom of winter, seen as nature's fleeting art. In Japan, poets compared falling snow to the fleeting beauty of human life, each flake dissolving like a moment that cannot be held. Even in scientific study, fascination endures. The first photographs of snowflakes, captured in the late 19th century, revealed not chaos but astonishing geometry, shapes repeating in endless variation, never repeating exactly. Physics tells us that this diversity arises from circumstance. Temperature, humidity, and the smallest currents of air shape the growth of each flake's crystal arms. So too do circumstances shape human beings. The symmetry of our shared structure, 2 eyes, 2 hands, a mind that seeks meaning, is constant. Yet the paths we walk, the obstacles we bend around, the bonds we weave, all create differences as intricate as the branching of ice. Snow falls, and the world becomes blanketed in countless variations of the same design. We, too, move through life as individual forms of a shared pattern, unique yet linked, fragile yet beautiful in our fleeting moment of existence. In the quiet corners of forests and fields, spiders work with a patience that borders on timeless. From a thread finer than hair, they build elaborate webs, their patterns both fragile and resilient. A single strand may bend with the wind, yet the whole design holds together, an intricate map of geometry suspended in air. Each web is more than shelter, it is a net cast into the unseen flow of life, waiting for what will come. The strategy is simple, though its artistry feels complex. The spider anchors its silk to branches or stones, pulling the threads into careful symmetry. Dew gathers on the strands at dawn, turning the trap into a wheel of silver light. To the insect that stumbles upon it, the net is invisible until too late. Struggle only tightens the hold, binding the prey more securely with every movement. What appears delicate reveals itself as unyielding strength. Human history carries echoes of these silent constructions. Across centuries, societies have woven their own nets, laws, economies, hierarchies, systems designed to guide behavior, but also to hold it in place. Just as the web traps the unwary, so too can rules and structures catch individuals in patterns they cannot easily escape. Debt, obligation, custom, and duty all resemble strands, unseen at first, yet binding once one is entangled. There is no malice in the spider's work, only survival. And perhaps, within human systems, the same logic applies. Order is maintained not by force alone, but by invisible threads of expectation that hold communities together. Yet those same threads can restrict, catching people in routines and obligations they never chose. To observe a web is to glimpse both beauty and constraint. Shimmering in the light, it represents balance, fragility held by tension, freedom bound by design. In the hunting net of spiders, and in the systems we weave ourselves into, there lies a paradox. Safety and entrapment, creation and captivity, spun from the same strands. Step into a canyon and speak, and the stone itself seems to answer. Your voice bounces from wall to wall, carrying further than you imagined. The echo lingers, repeating what was said, unchanged and undeniable. Once released, the sound belongs no longer to you but to the air, the rock, and the silence that gives it shape. For early travelers, echoes were more than curiosities. In ancient Greece, the myth of Echo told of a nymph who could only repeat the words of others, her voice trapped in endless reflection. To speak in a cavern was to call her name, to awaken the sense that words can outlive the speaker. Roman writers described certain valleys where echoes could return many times, a chorus born from a single syllable. These places became both wonders of nature and reminders of speech's lasting weight. Across cultures, echoes also carried spiritual meaning. In the mountains of Tibet, chants were often performed where sound could circle back, doubling the power of prayer. Native American stories spoke of voices carried by the land itself, a sign that the earth was listening. In all cases, the echo transformed sound into something larger than intention, reshaping human words into natural music. Scientists now explain the echo as simple physics, waves of sound reflecting against hard surfaces, traveling back to the ear. Yet the experience remains strangely haunting. The canyon does not judge, but it does preserve, forcing one to hear again what was already said. Words cannot be retracted. They travel outward, return altered, and remain in memory. So the echo becomes more than a trick of sound. It is a reminder that speech, once spoken, carries on beyond our control. Just as canyons return our voices, life itself returns the weight of words. In the stillness after the echo fades, one understands that silence, too, has its own kind of wisdom. Picture a wide savanna in late afternoon. The air is warm, the ground dry and patterned with the prints of heavy feet. A herd of elephants moves slowly, their pace unhurried, until a sudden sound breaks across the plain. Almost instantly, the adults shift formation. The youngest calves, small and uncertain, are nudged inward while the larger bodies create a ring around them. Tusks outward, trunks alert, the circle closes. This is not random movement. It is an ancient pattern of protection. Researchers observing wild elephants have long noted this behavior. When lions prowl nearby, or when unfamiliar humans approach, the herd responds with this living shield. Each adult knows its place without command, as though the knowledge is woven into memory itself. From above, it looks like a wheel of immense gray bodies, encircling something fragile at the center. The calves, pressed together in the middle, are quiet, sensing safety in the warm walls of their kin. This protective instinct reflects something deeply familiar. Human families, too, gather their young at the center when danger nears. In ancient villages, homes were arranged around courtyards where children could play under many eyes. In crowded city streets, parents instinctively reach out, forming barriers with arms and hands. Communities across history have encircled their vulnerable ones, whether by architecture, custom, or simple human closeness. What is striking is the unity it requires. The herd acts as one body, not a collection of individuals. The strength lies not in a single elephant, but in the collective decision to stand together. In this way, the circle becomes more than defense. It is a symbol of trust, of loyalty, of lives bound by shared survival. When the danger passes, The formation slowly opens, the calves stepping back into the rhythm of travel. Yet the memory lingers, reminding us that protection is often silent, expressed not through words but through presence. Like elephants on the plain, we, too, create circles, of family, of friendship, of community, holding one another safe at the fragile center of life. Imagine a still body of water on a quiet morning. Its surface is glass-like, reflecting sky and trees without interruption. But then, almost without warning, a film of green begins to spread. Within days, the lake transforms. What was once clear and open is now clouded, filled with drifting blooms of algae. These sudden growths appear harmless at first, even beautiful in their brightness. Yet they carry weight, consuming oxygen, blocking light, overwhelming the fragile balance of the water below. People have long noticed these transformations. Fishermen spoke of lakes that turned overnight, of rivers once full of life becoming silent in a single season. Today, we call them algal blooms, often fed by warmth and excess nutrients. But long before the science was known, such events were warnings, signs of imbalance, of something too much or too fast. Imagine yourself standing at the shore, watching as the change unfolds, subtle at first and then unstoppable, the water itself becoming unfamiliar. In human life, rumors and ideas often spread in similar ways. A single word whispered in passing can ripple outward, gathering voices, swelling until it becomes impossible to contain. What begins as a fragment of truth, or even a misunderstanding, can overtake the clarity of thought, clouding judgment much like algae clouds the lake. The balance of a community, like the balance of an ecosystem, can shift almost overnight. And yet, within both patterns lies a lesson. Growth is natural, but unchecked growth carries risk. Light is necessary, but too much can blind. To see the bloom is to see both vitality and fragility entwined. Just as the lake eventually settles, so too do storms of words and ideas fade, leaving behind a memory of how swiftly equilibrium can be lost. The sudden bloom reminds us that balance, once broken, is not easily restored, and that what spreads quickly may take far longer to heal. At the close of its journey, the salmon turns against the current. Born in quiet freshwater streams, it has spent years wandering the wide ocean, feeding in depths far from its birthplace. Yet when the time arrives, instinct calls it back. Against the pull of rivers and rapids, it climbs, leaps, and pushes upstream, often to the very stones where its life began. The return is not easy. Many perish on the way. But for those who succeed, the cycle closes in a place that feels like origin, as if the beginning and end must always touch. Human life carries this same impulse. Across cultures, people return to beginnings, childhood homes, ancestral villages, sacred sites where generations gathered before them. A traveler may walk countless miles only to stand again in the doorway of their first dwelling. An elder may seek comfort in the foods or songs of youth. In these gestures, the return is not about nostalgia alone, but about grounding, a need to feel the circle of life drawn complete. Ancient traditions honored this cycle with ritual. In Greece, initiates of the Eleusinian mysteries were led through journeys that mirrored descent and return, symbolizing death and rebirth. In India, pilgrims trace sacred rivers to their sources, believing that to walk upstream is to walk closer to the origin of the self. Even in modern times, reunions and memorials echo the same truth. We seek to reconnect with where we began, not because the past holds us, but because it explains us. Biology explains the salmon's return as imprinting. The young fish remembers the chemical fingerprint of its stream and follows that signature back. For humans, the signature may be less tangible, a familiar scent, a remembered story, a name spoken after decades. Yet both echo the same pattern, a pull toward origin that resists time and distance. The salmon's struggle reminds us that to move forward is also, in some way, to circle back. Our journeys bend, scatter, and stretch far, but the current of memory carries us upstream, toward the places that shaped us first. In the wild, survival often unfolds as a silent choreography. A lion crouches low in tall grass, muscles tensed, eyes fixed on its quarry. Nearby, antelope lift their heads, ears twitching at the faintest sound. One side waits for the moment to strike, the other, for the instant to flee. Neither move is random. Every step, every pause, belongs to a dance older than memory, a rhythm where the predator sharpens pursuit and the prey hones escape. This dance is not mere violence but balance. Predators test the strength of the herd, often culling the weak, while prey refine their vigilance and speed in response. Through this repeated exchange, both sides evolve, shaping one another across generations. The chase, though cruel in appearance, is a form of dialogue. Movement and countermovement, silence and burst, a mirrored pattern that keeps ecosystems alive. Human life holds reflections of this ancient rhythm. In rivalries, debates, and competitions, one advances, another retreats, each shaping their next move in response to the other. Even in romance, pursuit and withdrawal weave their own subtle choreography, gestures of approach balanced by gestures of distance, a testing of strength, interest, and endurance. Just as predator and prey refine one another, so too do people shape themselves in the tension between desire and resistance, ambition and caution. Literature and myth preserve countless echoes of this dynamic. Greek tragedies describe hunters undone by their quarry, while folktales speak of tricksters who turn pursuit into victory by wit rather than strength. Across cultures, the chase is not only about survival but also about meaning. The way pursuit reveals longing and escape reveals freedom. The paradox is that the dance never ends. Predators cannot live without prey, and prey cannot evolve without predators. In human lives, too, rivalries and romances form patterns that repeat, shaping identities through the very tension they create. What seems like conflict is also connection, an endless rhythm of chase and retreat, binding the living together in movement that is both struggle and symmetry. On warm summer nights, meadows and riverbanks begin to glow. At first the flashes of fireflies seem scattered, small bursts of light pulsing without order. But as minutes pass, the sparks fall into rhythm, dozens of insects blinking together as if guided by a hidden conductor. What appears at first as chance becomes a pattern, a silent conversation written in light. For centuries, people watching these gatherings sensed a quiet magic. In Japan, fireflies, called hataru, were seen as souls of the departed, their glowing synchrony a bridge between worlds. Poets describe the sight as both beautiful and fleeting, a reminder that even the most delicate moments can carry deep meaning. In parts of Southeast Asia, entire trees were said to shimmer when fireflies gathered, turning the forest into a cathedral of living stars. Modern science studies the same phenomenon with precise instruments. Biologists found that fireflies adjust their rhythm by watching their neighbors, until eventually the group beats as one. The same mathematics is found in human life. Heart cells in a dish begin to pulse together. Crowds of people walking on a bridge unconsciously fall into step. Synchrony arises not by command, but by gentle influence, each participant shaping and being shaped. In many cultures, lovers walking among fireflies believed the lights reflected the joining of two souls. The gentle glow became a symbol of hearts finding rhythm in each other, moving together without words. Even today, to stand in a field as hundreds of tiny lanterns pulse in unison is to feel that harmony is possible, not only in nature but in human connection. The synchrony of fireflies reminds us that unity does not come through force. It comes through listening, adjusting, and slowly aligning until light itself is shared. In their glow, we see both the mystery of the natural world and the quiet ways in which love brings us into rhythm with another. Beneath the surface of warm seas, where sunlight filters in shifting patterns, coral reefs rise slowly over centuries. At first glance, they appear as stone, lifeless and still. But look closer, and you find that reefs are not rocks at all, but living communities, built by countless tiny creatures layering their skeletons, one atop another. Each coral polyp is small, almost invisible, yet together they create vast structures that stretch for miles, forming underwater cities of color and shape. The pace of this building is almost imperceptible. A few millimeters in a year, A reef may take centuries to grow into the size of a single building. And yet, over millennia, these patient architects craft entire landscapes, arches, towers, and walls, woven from limestone and life. Around them, fish find shelter, algae drift in the currents, and entire ecosystems depend on their quiet labor. To swim above such a reef is to drift over a city older than memory, its streets alive with creatures, its walls humming with unseen exchanges of energy. Humans, too, build in this way. Our cities rise layer by layer, brick upon brick, each generation adding to the foundations of the last. What begins as a settlement grows into a town, then a metropolis. Cathedrals, marketplaces, and neighborhoods accumulate across centuries, until the city becomes not the work of one lifetime, but the collective effort of thousands. Like coral reefs, our civilizations embody patience, growth measured not in years, but in eras. There is also fragility in both worlds. Just as a reef can be broken by storm or bleached by heat, human cities, too, can fall to neglect or disaster. Yet the impulse to rebuild remains. From fragments, communities rise again, layering new life upon the remnants of the old. So when you imagine a reef beneath the water, see not just stone, but history written in living form. The coral's slow build mirrors our own, a testament that lasting creations emerge not from speed or force, but from steady, collective effort over time. Imagine a slender vine reaching upward from the forest floor. Its stem is too thin to stand alone, yet it continues to grow, searching with quiet persistence. When it touches a branch, a wall, or even another plant, it begins to curl. The tendril wraps gently, then firmly, finding support in what it has discovered. Over time, the vine climbs higher, weaving its way through the structure it holds on to. Its survival depends not on strength, but on connection. For centuries, people have noticed this embrace of vines. Ancient gardens in Rome and Persia were filled with climbing plants, deliberately trained along columns and archways, their green shapes softening stone with living curves. In some traditions, vines came to symbolize fidelity and friendship, their spirals echoing the bonds between people. Imagine yourself walking beneath such a garden wall, where every surface is touched, every rough edge softened by green that leans upon what stands beside it. In human lives, too, there is a need to cling, to wrap ourselves in closeness. A hand reaching for another in silence, a child leaning into a parent's shoulder, a friend who becomes the support we lean upon in difficult times. These gestures may seem small, but they are the tendrils by which we rise. Like the vine, we do not always stand through strength alone. We grow higher when held by the presence of others. Yet the vine's embrace also teaches balance. Too tight a hold can strangle, too loose and it cannot climb. In this tension lies a quiet truth about relationships. Closeness thrives when it supports, not when it consumes. As you imagine the spiraling green tendrils, remember that to grow is not only to reach upward, but also to allow ourselves to be supported, gently, in the embrace of connection. When the moon drifts across the face of the sun, the world changes in an instant. Light fades, shadows sharpen, and even the air seems to hold its breath. For a few brief minutes, day becomes twilight, and the familiar order of things is overturned. Yet this darkness is not destruction. It is a passing veil, a shadow that reveals by concealing. The sun remains whole, waiting behind the cover, patient as always. Human understanding follows a similar rhythm. Doubt can pass across the mind like an eclipse, obscuring what once felt certain. In ancient times, eclipses were seen as signs of danger, cosmic interruptions that unsettled the daily rhythm of life. Kings consulted their astrologers, farmers paused in their fields, and priests led ceremonies meant to restore balance. The shadow stirred fear, but it also stirred reflection. If light could vanish so suddenly, what else might lie hidden in the structure of the world? Over centuries, the meaning of eclipses shifted. In China, the event was once described as a celestial dragon devouring the sun. In Greece, philosophers wondered if the motions of shadow could reveal the scale of the heavens. And in modern science, eclipses became a tool of discovery. During one in 1919, astronomers confirmed Einstein's theory of relativity by watching starlight bend around the sun's hidden mass. A shadow, meant to obscure, opened the way to new truth. For people, too, moments of doubt need not be feared. They may cover clarity for a time, but they also invite deeper sight. Just as the eclipse reveals stars that cannot be seen in full daylight, uncertainty often uncovers truths overlooked in brightness. When the shadow passes, the light returns, and with it comes a renewed sense of what was always there, steady and waiting. The eclipse reminds us that truth can be hidden but not erased. Its shadow is temporary, its light enduring. In the silence of that passage, we learn that even darkness can serve as a guide. In the animal world, stillness is not always a choice, it is survival. A deer grazing at the forest's edge may suddenly sense the weight of unseen eyes. Muscles tense, yet instead of fleeing, it stands motionless. Rabbits, too, often freeze when they feel a predator's gaze. To remain still is to blur into the background, to hope that silence and invisibility will be stronger than speed. Evolution has refined this response over millennia. For many species, freezing at the right moment has meant the difference between life and death. Scientists describe this as tonic immobility, a state where the body locks in place under extreme threat. It is neither full surrender nor full resistance, but an in-between space of waiting. Predators, tuned to notice motion, may overlook prey that remains absolutely still. In this way, immobility becomes its own form of defense, a paradox where doing nothing is the most active choice possible. Human beings, though far from the forest chase, carry traces of this same instinct. In the presence of authority, when suddenly addressed by a teacher, an officer, or an employer, the body sometimes stiffens before words can form. Eyes widen, speech falters, and for a moment, one becomes motionless under the weight of another's gaze. It is not danger in the physical sense, yet the mind and body respond as if cornered. History provides countless examples of this silent paralysis. In courts and assemblies, ordinary people often fell quiet before kings and judges, their voices locked away by the pressure of authority. Even in daily life, the freeze can be felt, in the pause before answering a difficult question, in the silence when all eyes turn unexpectedly. The predator's gaze and authority's stare share a common thread. Both command attention, both create stillness. The paradox is that stillness can protect, but it can also entrap. To freeze is to survive in one world, yet in another it may surrender power. Between movement and silence, prey and person alike navigate the ancient tension of being seen. As daylight fades, flocks of starlings gather in the open sky. At first they appear scattered, small groups arriving from distant fields. Then, almost without notice, the separate clusters begin to merge. Hundreds, sometimes thousands of birds, swirl together in vast, fluid shapes. The sky becomes a canvas of motion, waves folding, spirals twisting, shadows expanding and collapsing in unison. To watch a murmuration is to see order without a leader, beauty without design. Ancient observers often described these gatherings with awe. In Rome, the shifting clouds of birds were read as omens, signs sent by the gods. In Britain, medieval farmers believed murmurations foretold weather, a kind of sky script written in feathers. The sight was mysterious because no single bird seemed to guide the rest, yet all moved as though following the same hidden law. Modern science has sought to explain this coordination. Biologists discovered that each starling watches the movement of its nearest neighbors, 6 or 7 at a time. Small adjustments ripple outward, creating patterns that appear deliberate but are born from simple rules. The mathematics of murmurations has since been used to understand human crowds, traffic flow, and even the spread of ideas. A murmuration is not only a performance of nature, but also a model of how systems organize themselves without central control. And yet, beyond science, the image still stirs something deeper. To see thousands of birds turning at once recalls the movements of human crowds, concerts swaying in rhythm, protests flowing through city streets, gatherings where individuals dissolve into a greater whole. The murmuration becomes both a mirror and a metaphor, a reminder of how we, too, move together, shaping patterns larger than ourselves. When the light finally fades, the birds descend, scattering into trees and fields. The sky returns to stillness, but the memory of their dance lingers, an echo of unity written in flight. Imagine an endless desert, its surface pale and dry beneath a blazing sky. At first glance, it seems lifeless, a place where nothing soft or delicate could survive. Yet beneath the crust of sand and stone, seeds lie hidden. They wait, sometimes for years, even decades, sealed within husks that protect them from heat and wind. To the eye, there is only emptiness. But below the silence, there is patience. When rain finally comes, rare, sudden, often violent, the desert changes almost overnight. Moisture seeps into the soil, and the long-dormant seeds awaken. Within days, blossoms spread across the barren land. Fields of color stretch where before there was only dust, purple, yellow, and white blooms swaying in air still heavy with the scent of rain. This phenomenon, called a desert bloom, lasts only briefly. Soon, the sun returns, the soil dries, and the flowers fade. Yet for that fleeting moment, the desert is transformed, proof that life endures in waiting. Humans, too, experience seasons of dormancy. There are times when opportunities seem absent, when effort brings no visible change, and the future feels sealed beneath drought. And yet, like the seeds beneath the sand, we hold within us the possibility of sudden renewal. A chance meeting, a shift in circumstance, or a moment of clarity can bring growth where none seemed possible. What makes the desert bloom powerful is not its rarity alone, but the quiet persistence that precedes it. The seeds do not vanish during the years of waiting. They simply bide their time, holding their strength until the world shifts in their favor. In this, they echo the human spirit, the ability to endure long silences, to wait with patience, and to rise suddenly into color when the moment arrives. So the desert teaches a lesson in stillness and timing. Beneath the driest years, beneath stretches of seeming emptiness, life waits. And when the rains come, whether in the desert or within ourselves, the bloom reminds us that beauty can emerge not despite the wait, but because of it. Imagine standing at the edge of a wide meadow. The grass stretches in every direction, each blade slender, delicate, and easily bent. On a still day, the field seems motionless, a green ocean waiting beneath the sky. But when the wind begins to move, the scene transforms. The grass shivers, bending together, then rising again, creating waves that ripple across the land. What was silent becomes alive with whispers, a sound like soft voices speaking in unison. People across centuries have been drawn to this sight. Ancient poets compared the motion of grass to the breathing of the earth itself, while travelers described meadows as living seas, rising and falling under invisible currents. Imagine yourself walking through such a field, your steps sending small patterns through the blades, only to be swallowed by larger movements of the wind. The grass does not resist. It bends, it sways, and in its yielding finds survival. In human life, the shiver of grass is echoed in the way crowds move or voices spread. A murmur in a marketplace, the hush of an audience, the shared intake of breath before a song begins, all carry that same sense of many small parts blending into one rhythm. Each person is an individual blade, yet together they create a pattern larger than themselves, a movement that feels both fragile and immense. And yet, the meadow is not uniform. Each blade catches the light differently, each sways at its own pace, even while part of the whole. The shiver of grass reminds us that unity does not erase individuality, it gathers it. To watch the wind pass through a field is to see harmony in motion, a quiet lesson that strength lies not in resisting alone, but in moving together, softly, like whispers carried on air. In the deep quiet of the forest, wolves move together. Their paws press silently into snow, their bodies fanning out across the landscape. Each animal knows its role. One drives the prey forward, another circles to the side, while others wait at the edges, ready to cut off escape. No single wolf commands every step, yet their movements align with an instinct older than memory. What emerges is not chaos but coordination, a living strategy carried out with perfect rhythm. Human conflict has long mirrored this choreography. On ancient battlefields, armies advanced in formations that echoed the hunt. Greek phalanxes bristled with spears, each soldier's shield protecting the next. Step out of line, and the wall collapsed. In medieval Europe, cavalry swept across open ground in flanking maneuvers that recalled wolves circling a herd. Even in the shifting fronts of modern wars, strategy often returns to the same principle: divide, encircle, contain. The patterns of survival in nature become the patterns of survival in human struggle. Yet coordination is not only about combat. In daily life, people join together in quieter hunts. Fishermen cast nets from different angles to guide shoals into a single trap. Farmers in old villages worked in groups to herd cattle or drive geese to market. Even in games and sports, teamwork reflects the same underlying truth. Strength lies not in the solitary effort, but in the weaving together of many. Science observes that wolves succeed less when hunting alone. Their prey often escapes, outpacing the lone pursuer. But in groups, success rises dramatically. The energy cost is shared, the risk reduced. For humans, the same law applies. Few great undertakings are achieved in isolation. Whether in conflict or cooperation, survival often depends on the ability to move as one body, guided not by a single voice but by a shared intention. The pack strategy reminds us that unity is both fragile and powerful. When bonds hold, the group achieves what no single member could. When they break, the hunt fails, and silence returns to the forest. Beneath the surface of the sea, where light fades and distances stretch beyond sight, sound becomes the language of survival. Whales fill this hidden world with long, haunting sequences of tones that can travel for hundreds, even thousands, of miles through water. A single call may last minutes, a patterned melody repeated again and again, weaving across the depths like a thread binding vast spaces together. Scientists have recorded these songs for decades, tracing their patterns the way one might follow a folk tune passed from village to village. Humpback whales, in particular, are known for their elaborate compositions. Each population shares a common song that slowly changes over time, as if generations of singers add their own verses. Within a few years, an entire ocean basin may echo with a new theme, spreading not by force but by resonance, carried whale to whale until the old tune fades into memory. For humans, the echo is unmistakable. Songs, poems, and stories have always traveled in much the same way: shared, altered, and remembered. A melody sung by ancestors can appear centuries later in a different form, yet still recognizable. Myths retold across cultures shift details but keep their rhythm, just as the whales reshape their calls while preserving a common structure. In both sea and society, art becomes a living current, passed forward not as possession but as inheritance. The paradox lies in distance. Whales may never meet those who hear their song on the far side of the ocean. Likewise, artists, poets, and musicians rarely know the strangers who carry their words centuries later. Yet connection endures, stretching across space and time, uniting lives that will never touch. To listen to the whale's song is to sense this vast continuity. A sound rising in darkness, moving unseen through water, finding an ear it was never meant to reach. Just as human art crosses generations, the whale's song reminds us that expression is both fragile and enduring, a voice cast into the unknown, trusting that somewhere, someone will hear. When autumn comes, a single leaf detaches from its branch. It drifts slowly, turning and tilting as if the air itself were guiding its descent. There is no resistance, no struggle against the wind, only the quiet surrender to gravity and the unseen currents of the season. To watch a leaf fall is to see change made visible, gentle, inevitable, and complete. Across cultures, this moment has carried meaning. In Chinese poetry, the falling leaf symbolized the passage of time, each descent marking the quiet rhythm of life and death. Japanese haiku often captured the stillness of leaves drifting across a garden path, presenting impermanence not as tragedy but as beauty. In medieval Europe, monks copied verses that likened the soul to a leaf carried toward rest, fragile yet purposeful in its journey. Science describes this process with careful precision. As daylight wanes, trees withdraw energy from their leaves, sealing them off from the flow of sap. What remains is a structure drained of green, pigments glowing in shades of red, yellow, and gold. Eventually, the leaf loosens, held by only the thinnest fibers, until the next breeze completes the cycle. What looks like surrender is also survival, a way for the tree to endure winter and prepare for spring. In human life, too, there are moments when holding on is no longer strength, but burden. The falling leaf reminds us that release can be an act of wisdom. To let go is not defeat, but a recognition that change has already arrived. Just as the tree trusts the seasons, we learn to trust the rhythm of our own transitions. When the leaf touches the ground, it does not vanish. It becomes part of the soil, nourishing roots for what will come. Change is not an ending, but a turning, one more cycle in the endless rhythm of life. High in the mountains, sound behaves differently. A single call, perhaps a shout, a laugh, or even a footstep dislodging a stone, travels outward and returns, carried back by cliffs and valleys. The echo arrives not immediately, but after a pause, as if the mountain itself has taken time to consider before answering. In these vast landscapes, silence and response become part of the same rhythm, a slow dialogue between human voice and ancient stone. For centuries, travelers have noticed this phenomenon, marveling at how sound lingers in such places. Shepherds in the Alps used echoes to carry calls across valleys, while poets and philosophers drew meaning from the delayed reply. An echo is not a mere repetition. It is sound stretched by distance, softened by terrain, reshaped by the contours of the earth. What begins sharp and immediate returns transformed, slower, more patient. There is something deeply human in this. We, too, hold words within us, carrying them long before releasing them. Sometimes a thought or a feeling is not spoken aloud, but rests in silence until the moment feels right. Like the echo, responses are not always instant. They arrive after reflection, altered by time and the shape of our inner landscapes. Unspoken words, whether of love, regret, or remembrance, reside in us like echoes waiting for their return. In mountain cultures, echoes were often seen as spirits answering back, or as proof that the landscape itself was alive. Similarly, within our lives, the delay of response can feel more than practical. It can feel sacred. A pause can give weight to words, or reveal truths we could not see in haste. So when you think of a mountain's echo, imagine more than sound rebounding off stone. Imagine patience embodied in sound itself, a reminder that silence is not emptiness, but part of the conversation. Just as mountains answer slowly, so too can we allow time to shape what we hold inside, and release it only when the moment is ready. Imagine the deep ocean, where light fades into blue shadow. In that quiet vastness, a shark begins to circle. Its movements are measured, unhurried, yet deliberate. Round and round it moves, tracing invisible loops in the water. The prey remains at the center, waiting, sensing the tension of what is to come. The circle is not just delay, it is preparation, a gathering of intention before the strike. Fishermen have long spoken of this behavior, watching from the decks of their boats as sharks traced patterns around schools of fish or lone creatures caught adrift. Ancient seafarers recorded the sight with both awe and unease, reading the circles as symbols of inevitability. Imagine yourself watching from above, seeing the smooth arcs ripple the water, the predator never rushing, only narrowing the path until the moment of choice arrives. In human life, decisions often unfold in the same way. We circle them, sometimes for days, sometimes for years. We gather information, weigh possibilities, replay conversations in our minds. Like the shark, we may seem slow, even hesitant, but beneath that circling lies focus. The moment of action, when it comes, is swift and final, shaped by all the loops that came before. The predator's circle is not simply about hunger. It is about inevitability, the narrowing of distance between thought and deed. To circle is to prepare, to measure, to align the body and the will. And perhaps it is also a reminder that hesitation is not always weakness. The waiting, the circling, is part of the strike itself. Just as the shark moves with patience before its burst of power, we too move through patterns of delay before stepping fully into action. A hive hums with quiet purpose. Thousands of bees move in concert, each with a task. Some forage for nectar, some tend to larvae, others guard the entrance. Their labor may seem small in isolation, yet together it sustains the hive, a living organism greater than the sum of its parts. But when bees vanish, through disease, disruption, or disorientation, the delicate order begins to unravel. Larvae are left untended, food stores dwindle, and the hum that once filled the air fades into silence. This is hive collapse, a phenomenon that reminds us how much depends on trust and cooperation. Human societies echo this fragility. Markets, families, and governments rely on countless unseen acts of trust. A merchant expects fair weight from a scale, a traveler assumes a bridge will hold, a neighbor believes that help will come if fire spreads. These are the unspoken threads binding communities. When they fray, collapse follows swiftly. History records not only the fall of empires through invasion, but through the slower erosion of trust, from rulers who broke their word, from currencies that lost their value, from neighbors who turned suspicion into law. Cultures across time have revered the bee as a symbol of order and continuity. In ancient Egypt, bees were linked to the tears of the sun god, embodying divine harmony. In medieval Europe, monasteries compared their communities to hives, each monk a worker serving a greater spiritual whole. The bee became a mirror for human ideals: diligence, unity, and sacrifice. Its disappearance, then, has always stirred unease. Science today observes colony collapse disorder with urgency, tracing its causes to pesticides, parasites, and shifting climates. Yet beneath the biology lies a metaphor. Without cooperation, even the strongest structure falters. The hum of the hive, like the murmur of a city or the rhythm of a village, depends on faith that each part will hold. The hive's silence is a warning. When trust vanishes, chaos follows. But when the bonds endure, life hums steadily forward, resilient as the bees that once filled the air with sound. From above, a hurricane appears almost serene. Satellite images reveal vast spirals of white cloud, arms curling outward in perfect symmetry, encircling a hollow eye of stillness. Yet beneath this calm pattern lies a storm of immense power, winds tearing across oceans, rains flooding coasts, waves reshaping shores. The spiral becomes both beauty and threat, a reminder that order and chaos often travel together. Meteorologists trace the birth of such storms to the warm waters of the tropics. Heat rises from the ocean's surface, fueling columns of air that begin to rotate under the influence of Earth's spin. Slowly, a spiral forms, tightening as energy gathers. What begins as scattered clouds becomes a vortex strong enough to dominate entire regions. The shape endures even as the storm moves, growing or weakening, turning always in its slow circle. For humans, the spiral of hurricanes reflects something deeply familiar. Anger, too, begins with small disturbances, an irritation, a word misheard, a wound not healed. Left to rise, emotion gathers strength, drawing in more and more until it becomes a tempest of its own. Outwardly, rage can appear destructive and consuming, yet at its center, much like the eye of the storm, there is often a hollow quiet, a space untouched by the surrounding turbulence. Cultures across time have noted this parallel. Ancient texts describe storms as metaphors for human passion, uncontrollable forces that overwhelm reason. Philosophers warned that anger, like a hurricane, expands far beyond its original cause, sweeping others into its path. Yet they also observed the strange symmetry in its unfolding, the predictable way emotion circles back upon itself, both patterned and chaotic, just as nature's storms are. The paradox of the spiral is that it holds both destruction and renewal. Hurricanes can devastate landscapes, yet they also redistribute heat, replenishing ecosystems in their wake. In human life, storms of rage may break bonds or alter paths, yet they can also clear the air, forcing truths to surface. The spiral reminds us that even in turbulence, there is a rhythm, an echo of balance within chaos. At night, when the sky seems empty to our eyes, bats move with flawless precision. They dart between branches, skim across water, and weave through tight spaces without colliding. This ability is not sight in the usual sense but a different way of perceiving, echolocation. By sending out high-pitched calls and listening to the echoes that return, bats build a map of the world from sound alone. What appears silent and uncertain to us becomes clear and navigable to them. For centuries, people wondered how these creatures of darkness found their way. Aristotle believed bats relied on touch, their wings brushing the air like whiskers. In medieval Europe, myths painted them as spirits of the night, half bird and half mouse, slipping through shadows with uncanny ease. The truth, sound as vision, would not be uncovered until modern science could measure what the human ear cannot hear. Today, biologists record the rapid clicks of bats, too high for us to perceive, bouncing from walls, trees, and even tiny insects. Each returning echo provides information: distance, shape, direction. The process is so precise that a bat can pluck a moth from the air in total darkness. What seems to us like blindness is in fact a different kind of clarity. This natural skill has inspired human invention. Sonar, used to map the ocean floor, and medical ultrasound, which reveals hidden forms within the body, both echo the bat's way of seeing through sound. We borrow from the creatures of night to navigate our own unknowns. And beyond science, the image carries a softer meaning. Just as bats trust the echoes to reveal what cannot be seen, we often move through uncertainty guided by subtler signals: intuition, memory, the quiet feedback of experience. In darkness, the path is rarely visible, but step by step, we learn to listen, to sense, and to move forward with patience. If you cut across the trunk of a tree, you find circles, rings of growth layered one within another. Each ring marks a year of life, a record of both abundance and hardship. In years of plentiful rain, the rings are wide and generous. In years of drought, they are thin and narrow. To the eye, it is a pattern of light and dark wood, but to science it is a kind of archive. Dendrochronologists, those who study tree rings, can read them as history books, revealing not only the age of the tree, but also the story of the seasons it endured. Some trees live for thousands of years, their trunks holding memories of ancient climates, fires, and floods. In their rings, scientists have traced volcanic eruptions, long-forgotten droughts, even shifts in the sun's cycles. What looks like silent wood is in fact a record of time itself, a biography written without ink. Humans carry their own versions of these rings. They may not be visible in polished circles of wood, but they show themselves in wrinkles formed from laughter and grief, in scars that recall pain and survival, in the quiet changes of posture or expression that come with years. Each life leaves its marks, some deep, some faint, all layered upon the self. To look closely at another person is, in a way, to read their rings, to sense the seasons they have lived through, whether rich with joy or thinned by struggle. There is comfort in this parallel. Neither tree nor human can choose which seasons come. Both must endure cycles of growth and scarcity, of warmth and cold. Yet in the accumulation of these layers lies strength. Each ring, each mark, adds to the whole, making the trunk steadier, the person wiser, the pattern richer. So the next time you pass a fallen tree, pause to notice its circles. And perhaps consider your own. Life inscribes its memory within us all, not always visible, but always present, marking the quiet story of how we have grown year after year. Imagine a stone wall, heavy and unmoving, its surface weathered by time. At first glance, it seems impenetrable, a symbol of permanence. But look closer, and you may see the fine thread of a root pressing into its cracks. Slowly, silently, it widens the fissure. Day by day, the root grows, not with speed or force, but with persistence. Over years, what seemed unbreakable begins to split, until the stone itself gives way. Across landscapes, this quiet work of roots can be seen. Trees splitting boulders on mountainsides, vines prying apart old walls, tiny seedlings shifting slabs of pavement. Ancient builders both admired and feared this power, knowing that no structure, no matter how strong, could stand forever against patient growth. Imagine yourself placing a hand against such a stone, feeling its rough surface, and knowing that beneath it, a softer force is steadily at work, unseen but unstoppable. In human life, resilience often mirrors these roots. We may meet obstacles that feel immovable, failures, griefs, barriers of circumstance. At first, they seem final, solid as rock. Yet small, repeated efforts, a habit, a word spoken, a step taken, begin to press into the cracks. Nothing changes overnight, but persistence reshapes what once felt immovable. Like the root, our resilience is rarely dramatic. It is steady, patient, and transformative. The roots breaking stone remind us that strength is not always in hardness, but in endurance. What grows slowly, what does not give up, eventually changes even what seemed eternal. To witness this is to understand that obstacles are not defeated in a single blow, but worn open by quiet insistence. Just as the tree stands tall because its roots have found their way through stone, so too do we rise, not in defiance of difficulty, but through it. In the stillness of night, the owl takes flight. Its wings cut through the air without a sound, gliding past branches and shadows unseen. Unlike most birds, whose feathers rush with noise, the owl carries silence into motion. Its plumage is shaped to muffle every beat, its body designed to strike without warning. To the creatures below, there is no sign until it is too late. Silence, here, is power. Among humans, silence has carried its own weight. Across cultures and ages, some of the most significant acts have unfolded without recognition. In monasteries, monks labored quietly, copying manuscripts line by line, preserving knowledge that would outlast kingdoms. In households, unacknowledged tasks, fetching water, tending fields, raising children, built the foundation of survival. In cities, workers toiled unseen in early dawn and late dusk, their efforts woven invisibly into the life of the community. The owl's wings mirror this truth. What goes unrecognized still shapes the world. Ancient myths often held owls as symbols of wisdom, not because they spoke, but because they saw and moved in silence. The Greeks placed the bird beside Athena, goddess of knowledge, while in other traditions the owl was linked to night visions and hidden truths. Always, its power came not from sound, but from the absence of it. Science, too, notes the paradox. The owl is not stronger or faster than other hunters. It succeeds because of quiet precision. Humans share this lesson. Not every act requires acclaim. The unseen kindness, the unnoticed effort, the silent resilience, these are the forces that sustain life, just as surely as the grand and visible deeds. When we think of value, we often imagine noise, applause, or recognition. Yet the owl reminds us that silence has its place. The unseen path, the unspoken gesture, the unnoticed contribution, each carries weight. Like wings in the dark, they move the world forward, even if no one is there to hear. For most of its life, the cicada is unseen. It spends years, sometimes 13, sometimes 17, buried in the soil, feeding quietly on the roots of trees. Hidden in darkness, it waits, unseen by the world above. Then, when the season arrives, millions emerge together. They climb bark and stones, shed their husks, and unfold fragile wings. What was silence becomes sound, as their chorus fills the air with a rhythm that can be heard for miles. The cycle of the cicada has fascinated observers for centuries. Ancient Chinese poets compared their emergence to resurrection, a return from the underworld to light. In Japan, their voices have been woven into summer songs, symbols of both transience and persistence. In modern science, the mystery lies in their timing. By emerging in massive numbers after long intervals, cicadas overwhelm predators, ensuring that enough survive to continue the cycle. Their strategy is not strength but patience, measured not in days but in decades. For humans, this rhythm carries echoes of our own lives. People, too, often retreat into long silences, periods of withdrawal, reflection, or obscurity, before returning to the world with renewed voices. Artists who vanish for years may reappear with works that redefine them. Exiled communities return to lands once thought lost. Even in personal life, after long pauses of solitude or grief, individuals step forward again, changed yet familiar, bringing with them the depth of their waiting. The paradox of the cicada's cycle is that absence is not emptiness. Beneath the surface, life gathers strength in quiet, preparing for its return. When the cicada sings, it does so not only for the present moment but for the years of silence that shaped it. In this way, its song is both an ending and a beginning, an echo of time past and a promise of time yet to come. On quiet mornings, a pond rests without ripple. Its surface holds the sky, trees, and passing clouds in flawless symmetry. To look into such water is to see both the world above and the depth below, as if the earth itself were holding a mirror. Unlike the ocean, restless and vast, or rivers, always in motion, the pond reveals by being still. In many traditions, this calm reflection carried meaning. In ancient China, scholars wrote of ponds as places for contemplation, their stillness offering clarity of mind. In Japan, garden ponds were designed to capture the image of mountains and pines, reminding visitors that harmony could be found between nature and thought. For medieval poets in Europe, a clear pool was often a metaphor for truth. Only when the water was untroubled could one's reflection be trusted. Science explains the mirror-like quality through physics. Smooth water acts as a surface where light bounces evenly, creating a reflection almost indistinguishable from the original. The slightest breeze distorts the image, turning clarity into fragments of color and motion. A pond's reflection is fragile, dependent on balance between air and water, silence and disturbance. Psychologists often note that human beings reflect each other in similar ways. A calm presence invites calmness in return. Anger, too, can spread silently, mirrored without thought. Just as the pond offers back the image given to it, we find ourselves reflecting the emotions and gestures of those around us. This subtle mirroring shapes relationships, creating bonds through empathy as much as through words. To sit beside a still pond is to be reminded of this quiet truth. Clarity comes not from forcing the water to still, but from allowing it to settle naturally. In the mirror of ponds, as in ourselves, reflection emerges from stillness, offering back the world with gentle precision. Walk through a forest after fire, and the first impression is silence. Charred trunks stand like blackened columns, ash softens the ground, and the air carries the faint scent of smoke long after the flames are gone. To human eyes, it seems like devastation, the end of life. And yet, hidden beneath the soot, something else begins. Seeds that require heat to open lie scattered in the soil. Roots preserved underground push out tiny green shoots. Within weeks or months, new growth appears against the stark blackness. The forest, scarred but alive, begins again. Ecologists call this process ecological succession. Certain trees, like pines, depend on fire to release their seeds. Some flowers bloom only in the ash's rich minerals, thriving where other plants cannot. Animals return cautiously, first insects, then birds, and eventually mammals, each drawn back as the land reshapes itself. What seemed like destruction reveals itself as renewal, a cycle as old as the earth. Humans, too, know this rhythm. After loss, after hardship, after seasons when life feels consumed by flame, there comes a time of quiet rebuilding. At first, the landscape of the self may appear barren, stripped of what once defined it. But slowly, often invisibly, resilience takes root. New habits form, new perspectives emerge, and strength grows in places where it was not before. What looked like an ending becomes the soil for beginning again. Across cultures, fire has long symbolized both destruction and purification. Myths tell of the phoenix, a bird consumed by flame only to rise anew from its ashes. Forests embody this same paradox in reality, that from burning comes growth, from loss comes renewal. So when you think of fire's aftermath, imagine more than ruin. Picture instead a patient rebirth, green shoots pushing through ash, the quiet labor of the earth rebuilding itself. Like the phoenix, both forests and people carry within them the strange power to rise, not despite devastation, but because of it. Imagine standing at the edge of a desert. Before you lies a vast expanse of sand, its surface shaped into ridges and curves that seem almost frozen in place. Yet the stillness is an illusion. With each gust of wind, grains move, sliding, tumbling, gathering again in new forms. Over days, dunes shift and ripple, their edges softened and redrawn. What appears permanent is, in truth, always in motion. Travelers of old knew this well. Caravans crossing the Sahara or the Arabian deserts spoke of landmarks vanishing overnight. Dunes moved as if by unseen hands. Maps could not keep up with the changes, and so people learned instead to navigate by stars and by memory, trusting what remained constant when the ground beneath them refused to stay the same. Imagine yourself walking such a landscape, where each step sinks slightly, and where the horizon shifts as though it were alive. In human life, moods resemble these dunes. One day, the mind feels calm and steady, the next restless, reshaped by unseen winds of thought and circumstance. We may believe our feelings are fixed, yet they shift continuously, building new ridges, erasing old ones. Just as dunes are not failures of solidity but expressions of change, our moods are not flaws in stability. They are the natural movement of an inner landscape. The shifting dunes remind us that impermanence is not chaos but rhythm. Change does not erase identity, it reshapes it. The desert may never look the same from one day to the next, yet it remains a desert, vast and enduring. So too with us. Beneath the shifting shapes of mood lies a deeper continuity, a self that endures even as the winds of life redraw the surface again and again. Woven deep within every cell lies a spiral, two strands twisting around each other in a quiet dance. This is DNA, the double helix that carries the instructions for life. Its shape is both simple and profound, a ladder coiled into infinity, each rung a coded message passed from generation to generation. Within its turns lie the blueprint of identity, the memory of ancestry, and the silent script that tells a body how to grow, endure, and change. Humanity has long searched for such patterns, even before science uncovered them. Ancient cultures imagined threads of fate spun by unseen hands, cords tying parents to children, lines that stretched backward into forgotten time. These stories hinted at what we now see in the helix: continuity, connection, and the weaving of past into present. The spiral is not merely a structure of biology, it is an emblem of inheritance. Daily life reflects this spiral quietly. The shape of a hand, the color of an eye, the rhythm of a heartbeat, all are echoes of those who came before. Farmers planting fields, artisans teaching apprentices, elders telling stories by firelight, each passed something forward, just as DNA carries codes through time. In this way, memory and identity are not kept in books or monuments alone, but within the very fabric of the body. Science reveals further wonder. DNA coils so tightly that miles of instruction are folded into spaces smaller than the tip of a pin. Yet when unfolded, this script is read with extraordinary precision. Small variations in the code create infinite diversity, shaping not only individuals but the evolution of species. Difference is not error but possibility, just as symmetry in snowflakes or bends in rivers bring unique beauty to shared patterns. The spiral of DNA reminds us that life is both fragile and enduring. Each turn of the helix holds memory older than our names, shaping who we are while reaching quietly into what we will become. Each autumn, the sky fills with wings. Monarch butterflies, fragile in appearance yet astonishing in endurance, begin a journey that spans thousands of miles. From the northern reaches of the United States and Canada, they drift southward, carried by winds and instinct, until they gather in the forests of central Mexico. What makes this journey remarkable is not only its distance, but its continuity. No single butterfly completes the round trip. Instead, generations hand the path forward, as if memory itself were carried in their fragile bodies. Scientists have studied this migration with wonder. Monarchs navigate by the sun, adjusting their flight as the Earth shifts beneath them. They sense magnetic fields, guiding their direction across landscapes they have never seen. A butterfly born in the late summer may live only long enough to fly south, while its descendants months later will return northward, completing a circle no individual remembers but the species somehow knows. For humans, the echo of this pattern is unmistakable. Families, too, are scattered across continents, connected by threads of memory, tradition, and return. A grandparent leaves a homeland, a child grows in another place, yet the stories and rituals bind them back together. Journeys stretch across lifetimes, just as monarch migrations unfold across generations. What one person begins, another continues, ensuring the line remains unbroken. Cultural history is filled with migrations both voluntary and forced, pilgrimages, exiles, and voyages across oceans. Each movement leaves traces, shaping identities in distant lands while keeping a quiet link to origins. Like butterflies clustering on trees in Mexico, people gather in diasporas, preserving warmth and continuity even far from home. The paradox of the monarch is that fragility sustains endurance. A creature so light that it can be lifted by a breeze carries within it the weight of an ancient journey. In their wings, we glimpse the resilience of connection, the way lives, though scattered, remain bound together across distance and time. Beneath the earth, far below the soil and stone we walk upon, molten rock gathers in silence. A volcano does not erupt without warning. It builds slowly, holding back immense energy beneath a crust that appears calm. For days, years, sometimes centuries, pressure mounts unseen. The ground above may seem still, but within, heat and force prepare for release. Ancient peoples living near volcanoes often read them as living beings. In Hawaii, Pele was honored as the goddess of fire, her temper both destructive and creative. The eruptions that destroyed villages also created new land, extending the island's shores. In Rome, Mount Vesuvius was treated with both reverence and fear, its sudden violence in 79 CE forever linked with the lost city of Pompeii. Myths and stories arose because volcanoes embodied what was difficult to grasp: the silence before catastrophe and the renewal that followed. Modern science explains eruptions through pressure and chemistry. Magma, rich with dissolved gases, rises until it can no longer be contained. The eruption is not only fire but release, an inevitable shift after the weight becomes unbearable. Just as steam bursts from a sealed vessel, the earth vents its tension through cracks, channels, and violent flows of lava. The image of a volcano resonates because it mirrors human experience. Emotions, too, may be pressed down, hidden beneath a surface of composure. Yet over time, unspoken words and unexpressed feelings build like heat below stone. When the moment of release comes, it can be sudden, even overwhelming. The eruption may bring destruction, but it also clears space for renewal, for rebuilding on fresh ground. To watch a volcano is to understand a paradox of nature. Silence is not always peace, and eruption is not always ruin. Both are parts of a cycle: pressure, release, and transformation, that echoes in the deep rhythms of the earth and within ourselves. In the cold silence of polar seas, icebergs drift like pale mountains. To the eye, they appear immense, yet what is visible above the surface is only a fraction of their true size. Nearly 90% lies hidden beneath the waterline, unseen but essential, anchoring the floating mass and shaping how it moves. What the ocean reveals is impressive, but what it conceals is far greater. Sailors through history learned this truth with caution. The gleaming white tips, glittering in sunlight, masked the darker bulk beneath, vast shelves of ice capable of tearing ships apart. The story of the Titanic endures as the most famous reminder of this hidden danger. But beyond its perils, the iceberg is also a quiet teacher. It shows us that the visible part of any structure, any life, is never the whole. Human beings carry their own icebergs within. What others see, words, gestures, outward expressions, are only the surface. Beneath lies the larger body of thought, memory, fear, and longing. Feelings not spoken, histories not shared, occupy most of who we are. Like the iceberg, the unseen portion shapes movement more profoundly than what floats in plain view. Psychologists often return to this image when describing the unconscious, the submerged mind that steers behavior. But you do not need science to feel the truth of it. Consider how much remains unspoken in an ordinary conversation. What is withheld, what is carried quietly, what is too deep to name. Our visible selves glide across the surface, but beneath, entire continents of emotion and memory lie in silence. The iceberg reminds us of patience and humility. To know someone fully requires more than seeing the surface. It asks us to imagine the vastness hidden below. And to know ourselves requires the same, a willingness to look beneath what is easily shown, to acknowledge the depths that sustain us. So the next time you picture ice drifting through cold seas, remember the balance between what is seen and unseen. Above the water, beauty; below, immensity. Together, they form the whole. Imagine looking into the clear shallows of the sea. 100 silver bodies flash as one, darting, turning, and folding back upon themselves in perfect coordination. Each fish is small, vulnerable alone, yet together they create a single shifting form, like a ribbon of living light weaving through the water. The school moves with neither leader nor map, guided instead by subtle cues, each fish adjusting to the next, a chorus of instinct and response. Sailors and divers have long been mesmerized by this spectacle. Some describe schools of fish as resembling clouds torn by the wind, others as flowing like smoke in the deep. The sight can feel almost unreal, thousands moving in silence, yet never colliding, each turn completed as though rehearsed countless times. Imagine yourself suspended in that water, surrounded by their movement, carried by a rhythm not your own but somehow deeply familiar. In human life, we see echoes of this collective motion. Crowds flow through city streets, cars stream down highways, dancers move together across a floor. Each individual makes small decisions, when to step, when to pause, when to turn, but the result is a pattern larger than any one person. The school of fish reveals that unity does not require control. It emerges from awareness, from attention to those moving closest to us. And still, within the school, no fish loses its identity. Each shines with its own light, each plays its part in sustaining the whole. To witness their unison is to be reminded that belonging is not the absence of self, but the sharing of direction. Just as fish survive by swimming together, so too do we find strength and safety in moving with others, our lives weaving into patterns more intricate than we could trace alone. From a distance, a tornado appears as a twisting column of air, tethered between earth and sky. Clouds gather in heavy silence, then descend into motion, a spiral born of pressure and imbalance. What begins as invisible wind becomes a force that sculpts landscapes, uproots forests, and scatters human structures in moments. The spiral turns with violence, yet at its center lies an eerie calm, the still eye around which the storm revolves. Human experience holds its own spirals, though they are less visible. Obsession begins quietly, a single thought repeated, a small desire turned over and over in the mind. With each cycle, the pull grows stronger, until it narrows the horizon, drawing life into a single point of focus. Just as the tornado consumes everything in its path, obsession can spiral until it rearranges a person's world, leaving silence in its wake. Ancient peoples often saw storms as messages from the divine. The Norse spoke of whirlwinds as the movement of unseen gods. Native American traditions described spiraling winds as spirits crossing between realms. In these stories, the tornado was more than weather. It was a mirror of intensity, of energies that could not be contained. In human terms, obsession has been viewed the same way, as possession, as inspiration, or as madness, depending on the culture and the cost. Science explains tornadoes as the meeting of opposites, warm air colliding with cold, high pressure with low. The spiral is not random, but the outcome of imbalance seeking release. Obsession, too, often arises from contrast, desire clashing with restraint, memory with reality, hope with fear. The mind twists around these tensions until the pattern takes on its own momentum. Yet even tornadoes pass. Their violence, though immense, is temporary. What remains is the mark they leave, a reshaped landscape that carries memory forward. So too with obsession. Once the spiral loosens, what is left is not the storm itself, but the traces it carved within. In autumn, forests become quiet theaters of preparation. Squirrels dart from branch to ground, carrying acorns and seeds in their mouths, burying them in scattered caches. Their movements seem frantic, yet beneath the apparent chaos lies a strategy honed by survival. Not every nut will be remembered or retrieved. Some will sprout into new trees, while others sustain the squirrel through the lean months of winter. What looks like overabundance is, in truth, a safeguard against uncertainty. Naturalists have long marveled at this behavior. A single squirrel may hide thousands of seeds each season, far more than it could ever consume. Forgetfulness, often seen as a flaw, becomes a hidden strength, ensuring the renewal of forests as oaks and pines grow from the overlooked stores. The act of hoarding is thus both self-preservation and unintentional generosity, a cycle where instinctive security creates future abundance. Human lives mirror this pattern in striking ways. People, too, set aside what they cannot use immediately. Coins in jars, grain in silos, data in vaults, wealth in accounts. Savings promise stability, a buffer against the unpredictability of seasons, economies, and personal fortunes. Like squirrels, humans rarely rely on a single cache. Instead, they diversify, spreading risk, hiding resources across different places, always aware that memory alone cannot secure the future. History records entire cultures shaped by this instinct. Ancient granaries of Mesopotamia, medieval treasuries guarded by stone, and modern banks glowing with digital records all arise from the same impulse, to hoard today for the uncertainties of tomorrow. Yet the paradox is clear. Security brings comfort, but it can also bind. In the pursuit of safety, abundance sometimes turns to obsession, and saving becomes its own form of hunger. The squirrel's stash reminds us that hoarding is never only about possession. It is about time, about carrying the warmth of summer into the silence of winter, about trusting that what is hidden today will sustain life tomorrow. In the end, both forest and family are renewed by what was once set aside, unseen but never without purpose. Across the wide deserts, where sand stretches without end, camels move steadily under the weight of heat and silence. They do not rush. Each step is measured, each pause deliberate. What allows them to endure is a hidden reserve, fat stored in their humps, water carefully managed in their bodies, strength kept for the long days when nothing can be found. To watch a camel cross the dunes is to see survival shaped into patience. For the Bedouin and Tuareg peoples, the camel was more than an animal of burden. It was a partner in life, carrying families, goods, and stories across the Sahara. Poetry described the camel as a vessel of hope, capable of bearing hardship when all else failed. Even when storms erased paths and the horizon seemed endless, the sight of these animals meant survival was still possible. Ancient travelers marveled at this endurance. Herodotus wrote of desert caravans moving with ships of the land, a phrase that still lingers. To merchants on the Silk Road, camels were bridges between worlds, carrying silk, spices, and ideas across thousands of miles. Their reserves made possible the slow weaving of cultures, binding distant cities through shared trade. Modern science explains their resilience with detail. Oval red blood cells that resist dehydration, the ability to raise body temperature to conserve water, and humps that store fat, not liquid, allowing energy to be released over time. What seems like mystery is a careful design for endurance. and within this endurance lies a reflection of ourselves. In difficult seasons, people too carry unseen reserves, not of water or fat, but of memory, belief, and quiet hope. These inner stores cannot be measured, yet they allow us to move forward when the path feels endless. The camel's reserve teaches that survival is not only strength in the moment, but patience shaped by what is quietly carried within. At the edge of continents, rivers meet the sea. What begins as a single current high in the mountains ends as a web of branching channels, spreading outward in a slow fan of water and silt. This is the river delta, a place where direction divides, where one path becomes many. To stand at its edge is to watch the river release its burden, depositing soil carried from far away, and in doing so, creating new land. Deltas are among the most fertile places on Earth. Civilizations have risen along them, sustained by the rich soils left behind by floods. The Nile, the Ganges, the Mississippi, each has nurtured entire cultures at its mouth. Yet the form of the delta is never fixed. Channels shift, land builds and erodes, and the water constantly redraws the map. From above, it looks like a branching tree pressed into the earth, or veins carrying lifeblood to the sea. There is a quiet human parallel in this. Our lives, too, begin as singular streams, flowing steadily through early years. But as we move forward, choices appear. Each decision, small or large, splits the current, sending us in new directions. Like the river, we do not follow only one path, but many, branching into possibilities that shape our landscape of experience. Some channels dry, others deepen, and still others return to join again, weaving a pattern only visible when looking back. The delta also carries a reminder about endings. What seems like division is also union. No matter how many branches form, they all lead toward the same sea. In this way, the delta becomes both a symbol of choice and of inevitability. Freedom to wander, yet certainty of return. So when you picture a river spreading wide at its mouth, think not only of water meeting the ocean, but of lives meeting their course, choices flowing outward, each one shaping the ground, until the whole journey converges again in silence and vastness. Imagine a storm building over the ocean. Winds rise, clouds churn, waves crash with relentless force. From the outside, all seems chaos, motion without pause, a world undone by turbulence. And yet, at the very center of this fury lies the eye. There, the air is strangely still, the sea momentarily quiet, the sun even breaking through. Within the storm's most violent circle exists a pocket of calm. Sailors throughout history told stories of entering this calm, of standing on deck amid silence while walls of cloud towered around them. To step into the eye was both relief and unease, for they knew it would not last. The stillness was temporary, a breath before the storm closed in again. Imagine yourself there, windless air, eerie light, a fragile calm surrounded by roaring distance. In human life, turmoil often swirls the same way. Demands, crises, emotions colliding like waves. Yet even here, an inner eye can be found. In meditation, in breath, in moments of reflection, there is a pause untouched by the storm around us. It does not erase the chaos, but it offers a center, a place from which to endure what comes. The storm's eye teaches a quiet paradox, that stillness can exist not in the absence of trouble, but within it. To find calm is not to wait for the winds to cease, but to recognize the center that remains steady while they rage. And just as the storm eventually passes, so too does turmoil. What lingers is the memory of the calm you carried within, the reminder that even in the fiercest storms, silence and steadiness are never entirely lost. On certain islands, the ground itself seems to move. Each year, millions of red crabs leave the shelter of forests and begin their march toward the sea. Their shells glisten in the sun as they cover roads, climb over rocks, and stream across beaches in a vast, steady tide. To watch them is to see not individuals, but a collective rhythm, each crab pulled by the same hidden signal, each step part of a larger journey. Human life holds echoes of this spectacle. In the morning rush of cities, streets fill with people crossing together, bodies flowing across intersections, guided by the same lights, drawn by the same hour. Festivals, pilgrimages, and markets show the same tide. Thousands moving with a shared purpose, a rhythm that seems to arise from something deeper than choice. The crabs remind us that mass movement is not chaos, but coordination shaped by time and necessity. Ancient cultures often marveled at migrations. The Greeks wrote of seasonal journeys of birds and beasts, seeing in them the cycles of life and the wisdom of nature's order. Islanders who watched crabs crossing shorelines sometimes built rituals around their return, treating the migration as a reminder of abundance, renewal, and the fragile balance between land and sea. To them, the crabs were more than creatures. They were participants in a pattern that included humans too. Science now explains the migration through tides and lunar cycles. The crabs march to release their eggs into the ocean, ensuring the next generation will rise with the currents. The timing is precise, guided by the pull of the moon and the rhythm of the seasons. Humans, though shaped by clocks rather than tides, follow the same principle. We gather, move, and disperse according to signals embedded in the structures of our world. The sight of red crabs covering an island is both strange and familiar. It reminds us that, like them, we are part of greater movements, crossing together, flowing together, carried forward by patterns we sometimes recognize and sometimes only feel. In the quiet corners of kitchens, cellars, and forgotten fields, life continues unseen. Mold begins as threads too fine for the eye, drifting invisibly through the air until they settle on a surface. There, in the stillness, growth begins. At first nothing seems to change, but slowly, a faint fuzz appears, delicate as dust. Over days, it spreads in branching networks, soft and persistent, until a surface once bare is transformed into a living colony. Biologists describe mold as a decomposer, essential to the balance of ecosystems. It breaks down what is old, returning nutrients to the soil, ensuring that nothing in nature is wasted. Yet its growth often goes unnoticed until it blossoms into color, green, blue, white, or black, revealing what has long been at work in silence. What appears sudden is, in truth, the visible end of a hidden process that has been unfolding patiently, thread by thread. Human ideas spread in much the same way. A thought drifts quietly from one mind to another, through a conversation, a story, or even a glance. At first it is invisible, too subtle to measure. Then, slowly, it takes hold, forming connections, weaving through communities. What begins as a quiet suggestion may, over time, grow into a movement, shaping culture and history. The visible moment of change, the speech, the book, the protest, often arrives only after years of silent growth. History offers many such blooms. Philosophies that once whispered in small circles became entire schools of thought. Scientific theories once doubted reshaped the world. Even traditions in families spread like spores, carried across generations until they take root in places far from their origins. The paradox is that strength often grows in silence. Mold thrives not in brightness but in shadow, not in noise but in stillness. So too do ideas often begin their journey hidden from view, gathering quiet strength until they cannot be ignored. The bloom, when it comes, is only the surface. Beneath it lies the patient work of unseen threads. On bright days, sunlight pours freely across fields and streets. Yet with little warning, a bank of clouds drifts across the sky. The warmth fades, shadows lengthen, and the world feels changed, though nothing has truly vanished. The sun is still there, steady and burning, only hidden behind a temporary veil. Clouds create their own eclipse, not of the cosmos, but of the everyday. In many traditions, this sudden dimming carried meaning. Ancient poets wrote of clouds as messengers of mood, their passing shapes reflecting sorrow or unrest. In Japan, the movement of clouds in art symbolized the fleeting nature of joy, a reminder that brightness may be covered but never destroyed. European monks, gazing at the sky from cloisters, described clouds as trials of faith, moments when divine light was hidden, though never absent. Science explains the phenomenon in simple terms. Water vapor gathers, condenses, and thickens into layers that block or scatter rays of light. The shift in atmosphere is measurable, predictable. Yet despite the clarity of explanation, the feeling remains striking. A single drift of gray alters how a landscape is perceived, softening colors, muting sound, and reshaping the mood of an afternoon. The image finds its echo in human experience. Doubt, like cloud, often obscures the steady light of joy. In moments of uncertainty, happiness may feel distant, as if hidden from reach. Yet just as clouds pass, so too do doubts. The light remains constant, waiting for its return. To notice clouds is to recognize the rhythm of concealment and revelation. Neither state is permanent. Both are part of a cycle that shapes how we see the world. In the eclipse of clouds, we are reminded that even when joy is hidden, it is not gone. It waits, steady as the sun, for the moment when the sky clears again. Far beyond the night sky visible to the eye, galaxies turn slowly, their stars arranged in sweeping arcs. In spiral galaxies, like our own Milky Way, these arcs stretch outward as great arms, curving in luminous patterns across millions of light years. From afar, they resemble whirls of smoke or the curling shells of the sea. But what they hold is far greater. Billions of stars, clouds of gas, and the promise of countless worlds, all bound together by gravity's patient pull. These arms are not solid structures. They are waves of density, regions where matter gathers more thickly, where stars ignite in clusters before drifting onward. Over millions of years, the arms persist, reshaped and renewed by the constant motion of the galaxy. It is less a fixed shape than a flowing pattern, as though the universe itself traced arcs of connection through space. There is a human reflection in this image. Our own arms extend outward when we seek, when we wish to hold, when we reach for another. Just as the galaxy's arms stretch across unimaginable distances, people reach across the spaces between them, bridging silence with touch, solitude with closeness. The gesture is ancient, as old as the first infant reaching for a parent, as enduring as lovers joining hands or friends drawing each other into an embrace. The spiral arms remind us that connection is not static but ongoing. Stars are born, fade, and scatter, yet the pattern endures. In the same way, human bonds shift through time. Relationships form, transform, or dissolve, yet the impulse to reach outward remains. It is written into us as surely as the spiral is written into the cosmos. So when you look at the night sky, imagine not only points of light, but the great sweeping arms that hold them together. And perhaps see in their curve a quiet echo of your own gestures, the reaching out, the longing to connect, the unending pattern that binds lives as gravity binds stars. Imagine a cliff rising above the sea, its face dark and solid, carved from stone that has stood for centuries. To the eye, it appears immovable, a monument of permanence. Yet at its base, waves arrive without pause. Each one breaks against the rock, carrying grains of sand away, softening edges, deepening cracks. The change is so slow that a single day seems to leave no mark, but over years, the cliff itself recedes, its form reshaped by water's persistence. Travelers along coastlines have long noticed this silent transformation. Ancient mariners charted coves and arches, only to find them altered generations later. Legends often grew around these shifting shores, as if the sea were sculptor and time its patient hand. Imagine yourself standing where land meets water, listening to the endless rhythm of waves, and sensing that what feels solid beneath your feet is quietly yielding to a force greater than itself. In human life, time works in much the same way. We imagine ourselves fixed, our habits and identities strong as stone. Yet each day brings small currents, moments of joy, stress, loss, or growth, that wear upon us. Rarely do we notice the change in the moment, but over years, we find ourselves reshaped. Wrinkles form, perspectives shift, relationships fade or deepen. What seemed permanent slowly transforms, not all at once, but through countless subtle impacts. The cliff's erosion reminds us that change is not failure, but the natural rhythm of existence. To be worn by time is not to be destroyed, but to be sculpted into new forms. Just as cliffs become arches, caves, and beaches, so too do we become new versions of ourselves. The waves do not cease, and neither does time, but within their persistence lies a quiet beauty, a reminder that transformation is the most enduring truth of all. When a herd runs, it does not move as scattered bodies but as a single organism. Hooves strike the earth in rhythm, each beat overlapping with the next until it becomes one continuous sound, like a great drum echoing across open ground. Within the herd, each animal adjusts unconsciously to the pace of those around it, heartbeats quickening together, muscles straining in the same direction. The shared pulse is not commanded. It arises, unspoken, from instinct and presence. Human gatherings often carry the same rhythm. In arenas and theaters, crowds begin to clap, at first uneven, then slowly converging into a single beat. The sound expands until the distinction between individual hands fades, replaced by a collective cadence. In ancient festivals, dancers circled fires, their steps aligning until the group seemed to move as one body. Soldiers marching, workers rowing, congregations chanting, all mirror the herd's unity, where separate lives dissolve into shared tempo. Across history, leaders recognized the power of this rhythm. Roman generals trained legions to advance in lockstep, knowing that discipline of movement carried not only strength but morale. In African and Polynesian traditions, drumming bound communities together, uniting participants in both spirit and body. Even in modern stadiums, when a chant spreads from one section to another, the sensation is not simply entertainment. It is the rediscovery of a deeper pulse that humans carry collectively. Science observes that rhythm has tangible effects. Heart rates synchronize when people sing together. Brain waves align during group rituals. Like animals in a herd, humans are wired to find safety and belonging in shared motion. The beat itself becomes a bond, a reminder that survival once depended on unity. The herd's shared pulse teaches that individuality need not be lost in rhythm. Rather, it is amplified. Many lives creating a single sound, many bodies moving as one. In that harmony, the world feels less divided, and the silence between us briefly disappears. In deserts where rain may not fall for months, the landscape often appears barren, silent, and still. Yet beneath the dry surface, life waits. Cacti, with their spines and swollen stems, conserve every drop of water. They endure scorching days and cold nights, standing motionless while seasons pass. Then, in a moment that feels almost miraculous, they bloom. From the armored plant bursts a flower, bright, delicate, and fleeting. Some blossoms last only a single night, opening under moonlight and closing before sunrise. Others endure a few days, vivid against the endless sand. For travelers, the sight of a cactus in bloom is unforgettable. The contrast is striking. Resilience transformed into fragility, austerity into abundance. Botanists explain this timing as survival. To bloom in drought would waste energy, but to bloom after rain is to seize opportunity. Pollinators arrive, seeds are spread, and the cycle of life continues in a place where survival seems most unlikely. The desert teaches that beauty often comes not in spite of hardship, but because of it. Human lives echo this rhythm. After years of difficulty, silence, or waiting, joy can arrive suddenly, blooming with the same startling vividness. A long struggle ends in achievement, grief softens into laughter, solitude gives way to companionship. The moment may be brief, but its impact lingers, remembered more brightly for the hardships that came before. Just as the cactus conserves strength for its rare flowering, people, too, gather endurance through long seasons of challenge, preparing for the moment of release. Cultures living in deserts have long honored these blossoms. In stories, cactus flowers symbolize renewal, patience, and the promise that even in scarcity, abundance can emerge. The paradox is that fragility and resilience meet in the same place. A flower so delicate grows from a body armored against the harshest conditions. In this, the cactus reminds us that endurance does not erase beauty, it prepares the ground for it. Beneath the forest floor, hidden from sight, lies a vast and intricate network. Threads of mycelium stretch through soil, weaving connections between roots, stones, and decaying leaves. To walk through the woods is to step above an invisible web that binds the living and the dead. What we see, the trees, the moss, the flowers, is only the surface. Beneath, the fungal web carries messages and nourishment, linking the forest into a quiet community. Ancient peoples often sensed this hidden bond. In Slavic folklore, mushrooms were thought to mark the boundary between worlds, sprouting where unseen spirits passed. In Japan, rings of fungi in the grass, what we call fairy rings, were seen as portals of mystery, places where human perception could not fully reach. Though the science was unknown, the intuition was present. Something beneath the ground connected life in ways not visible to the eye. Today, biologists describe this web as the Wood Wide Web. Through it, trees share carbon, warn of insects, and even nurture their young. A towering oak may funnel energy into seedlings shaded beneath its canopy. A dying tree can release its reserves to neighbors before collapsing into the soil. The mycelial threads act as both messenger and mediator, carrying signals and sustenance alike. This unseen network mirrors the structures humans have built above ground. Just as the internet connects distant minds, the fungal web connects distant roots. Both systems rely on countless small links, fragile in isolation, yet powerful together. And just as ideas spread across digital space, so too do signals travel through soil, binding individual lives into something larger. To imagine the fungal web is to recognize a quiet truth. Connection is not always visible, yet it shapes survival. Beneath the silence of the forest, as beneath the silence between people, threads are always at work, weaving the bonds that sustain life. Night after night, the moon changes shape. At first, it is a thin crescent, a delicate curve rising just after sunset. Slowly it grows, becoming half, then nearly full, until at last it shines as a perfect circle of light suspended in the sky. Then, just as gradually, it diminishes, waning into shadow, retreating into darkness, before beginning the cycle again. This rhythm is so familiar that we scarcely notice it, yet it has shaped human life for thousands of years. Farmers once timed their planting by the phases of the moon, using its glow to work after sunset. Sailors studied its pull on tides, guiding their journeys by the steady wax and wane of lunar light. Poets, too, found meaning in its cycles, writing of fullness and loss, of return and renewal. The moon's phases became a calendar in the sky, measuring time not by machines but by the turning of shadow and light. There is something deeply human in this pattern. We, too, move through cycles of fullness and emptiness. At times energy rises, bright and expansive, like the full moon drawing tides to their height. At other times, we wane into stillness, withdrawing inward, conserving strength. Just as the moon does not shine on its own but reflects the sun, our own brightness often comes from what we take in, connection, care, inspiration, that allows us to glow outward. Cultures across the world have seen in the moon a mirror of human feeling. Festivals marked its return to fullness, rituals honored its dark silence. The cycle is not a flaw, but a reminder that change is natural, that renewal requires pause, that no phase is permanent. So when you look at the night sky, notice not only the moon's light but its rhythm of becoming and fading. Imagine it as a companion to your own inner tides, reminding you that energy, like emotion, waxes and wanes, and that every darkness carries the certainty of return. Imagine a spider at the center of its web. The silk threads stretch outward in careful symmetry, each line placed with precision. Once the weaving is done, the spider does not chase, does not rush. It waits. Hour after hour, it remains still, feeling the vibrations that pass through its web, alert to the smallest tremor. Its patience is its strength. For centuries, people have noticed this quality in spiders. Farmers saw them as quiet allies, thinning the insects that threatened crops. In folklore, spiders often became symbols of fate and timing, their webs compared to the threads of destiny itself. Imagine yourself watching such a web in morning light, each strand shimmering with dew. Nothing moves, yet the air carries a sense of readiness, as if action could come at any moment. In human life, opportunity often arrives in the same way. We prepare, we set things in place, and then we wait. The waiting can feel endless, yet it is part of the work. To leap too soon is to miss what could come. To wait too long is to lose it. Like the spider, we find ourselves balancing stillness with readiness, trusting that patience itself will make the moment clear. The spider's patience is not empty idleness. It is an active attentiveness, a quiet faith in the web we have built. It reminds us that not every effort shows immediate results, and not every desire can be chased. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in stillness, in the willingness to wait until the world delivers what we could not force into being. And when the moment finally arrives, the action is swift, precise, and complete, shaped by all the quiet hours of patience that came before. In the still hours of night, when most of the forest lies in silence, the owl keeps its solitary watch. Perched high among branches, it waits with patient stillness, listening to sounds that others cannot hear. Its wide eyes cut through darkness, catching the faintest movement below. Unlike birds that gather in flocks, the owl lives and hunts alone. Solitude is not its weakness but its way of life, a rhythm of silence, distance, and self-reliance. Humans, too, have carried this path. Throughout history, some have chosen to step apart from the crowd. Hermits in desert caves, monks in mountain monasteries, and wanderers who preferred the open road, all mirrored the owl's life, seeking meaning not in noise and company but in quiet observation. Even within bustling cities, loners walk streets unseen, keeping to their own pace, their presence as discreet as wings passing overhead. Cultures often wrapped owls in layers of symbolism. To the Greeks, the owl was a companion of wisdom, a sign of clear sight in darkness. To others, it was an omen, a messenger of things hidden and mysterious. Whether seen as guide or warning, the bird's solitude carried power. It stood for knowledge that did not need an audience, for truths perceived in stillness. Science notes that owls are shaped for this independence. Their wings allow silent flight, their vision is adapted for the night, their instincts tuned to survive without the support of a flock. Humans, though social by nature, also find strength in solitude. In quiet hours, reflection deepens. Ideas take form. A sense of self sharpens in ways that constant company might blur. The owl's solitude reminds us that standing apart is not the same as being lost. There is wisdom in silence, clarity in watching from a distance, and resilience in learning to move unseen. Like the owl in the branches, the human loner is a guardian of the night, an observer of truths that only reveal themselves when the world has grown still. At the edge of rivers and watering holes, herds gather. Antelope, elephants, zebras, buffalo, creatures that may compete for food or territory during the day, approach the same pools with caution and quiet. The air is tense, yet unified. Hooves press into mud, trunks lower, mouths meet the water. For a few moments, differences vanish and survival is shared. The herd drinking together is more than instinct. It is a ritual of necessity, repeated across continents and centuries. Biologists describe this as a fragile truce. Predators may linger nearby, and rival species may crowd the same shore, but water demands order. To drink is to enter a vulnerable state, heads lowered, defenses distracted. Safety comes not from isolation, but from the presence of many. Thousands of eyes scanning the horizon provide more protection than one. The act of drinking together is thus an agreement, unspoken, temporary, but deeply binding. Human communities have long mirrored this pattern. Villages formed around wells and rivers, temples rose beside springs, and entire civilizations flourished where water could be shared. To gather at the same source meant more than survival. It became a ritual of belonging. Festivals centered on rivers, prayers offered before fountains, and meals shared from common vessels all echo the animal instinct at the water's edge. In literature and myth, water often stands for communion. Ancient texts describe sacred rivers where people cleanse themselves before entering cities or shrines. In many cultures, the act of drinking together sealed bonds, whether in friendship, alliance, or reconciliation. Like the herd, humans lower their defenses in such moments, acknowledging that beneath layers of difference lies the same basic need. The paradox of the watering place is that vulnerability creates unity. To drink together is to admit dependence, on the water, on the earth, on one another. What seems like a simple act becomes a reminder of shared fragility, and in that fragility, a quiet strength. Just as herds find safety at the river, people find community in rituals that return them, again and again, to the same source. Across the surface of the sea, calm seems absolute. Then, with sudden force, a whale erupts from the water. Its massive body arcs skyward, trailing cascades of foam and spray. For a moment, gravity loosens its hold, and the creature hangs suspended, before crashing back into the waves with a thunder that carries for miles. The breach is brief, but it lingers in memory, an act both violent and graceful. For centuries, sailors tried to explain why whales performed this great leap. Some believed it was a form of play, a joy expressed by the largest of animals. Others thought it a signal, a way for pods to communicate across vast distances of ocean. In Maori traditions, the sight of a whale breaching was taken as a blessing, a reminder of the deep bond between people and the sea. The event felt less like chance and more like revelation. Modern science approaches the breach with careful observation. Biologists note that whales may leap to dislodge parasites, to assert dominance, or to draw attention. The sound of the impact can travel for kilometers beneath the surface, carrying meaning through vibration. Yet even with explanations, the act feels larger than function. When a 40-ton body launches into the air, the sea itself seems to express emotion. For humans, the image mirrors something within. Just as pressure builds in silence, so too do we store unspoken feelings. A moment of catharsis, a cry, a decision, a release, erupts suddenly, breaking the surface of composure. Like the whale, we rise briefly out of the depths, exposing what lies hidden, before returning again to quiet waters. The breach is a reminder that even the most immense forces seek release. Whether in ocean or in heart, silence cannot hold forever. From time to time, the hidden must rise, leap into view, and fall back changed. Beneath the soil, unseen and often forgotten, seeds wait. Some sprout quickly, rising at the first touch of warmth and water. Others linger, lying dormant for years, even decades, before showing the faintest sign of life. This hidden patience is part of their design. The seed carries within it everything needed for growth, yet it will not move until the conditions are right. Waiting is not failure. It is survival. Scientists have discovered seeds that germinated after centuries of rest. Buried in dry caves or frozen in permafrost, they slept through ages of change, carrying their small flame of possibility through time. When at last they touched moisture and warmth, they unfurled as though no years had passed. Their delay was not absence but quiet endurance, a testament to the resilience hidden in stillness. There is a human reflection here. Dreams, too, sometimes rest beneath the surface of our lives. A hope set aside, a goal postponed, a path once imagined but abandoned, these lie dormant like seeds in the soil of memory. At times, it may seem they have been lost altogether. But often, they are simply waiting for the right season. The chance circumstance, the unexpected opening, the inner readiness that allows them to emerge. Cultures have long drawn meaning from seeds. Myths speak of creation from kernels of grain, of worlds born from what was once hidden in darkness. Farmers trust the buried seed without seeing it, knowing that beneath the ground, unseen work is being done. In the same way, we are asked to trust our own seasons of dormancy, to understand that growth is not always visible, and that delay does not erase possibility. So the next time you hold a seed in your hand, consider its silent promise. Within its stillness lies a future not yet revealed. And in the same way, within our long pauses and waiting years, the shape of tomorrow quietly rests, ready to rise when the moment comes. Imagine a polar bear resting on a sheet of ice. The floe is vast enough to carry its weight, yet small enough to drift unnoticed across the endless sea. The bear does not guide its course. The currents move it silently, carrying it farther from shore, farther from what is certain. From a distance, the sight seems tranquil, a creature floating in stillness, but beneath that stillness lies a quiet displacement, a life carried into uncertainty. For centuries, Arctic travelers told of these drifts, watching bears vanish slowly across horizons of white and gray. Hunters and explorers understood the danger. The bear might not return to land for days, carried by forces it could not resist. Imagine yourself standing on that ice, surrounded by nothing but water and sky, your footing solid yet your direction entirely adrift. In human life, there are moments that feel the same. Circumstances shift, jobs are lost, homes abandoned, relationships dissolve. We find ourselves carried by forces beyond control, drifting away from the familiar. At first, it may feel like stillness, days that blur together, a quiet waiting, but beneath it, everything has changed. Like the bear, we float on what remains, searching for ground that may no longer be where we left it. The polar bear's drift is a reminder of fragility, but also of endurance. To drift is not to give up, it is to survive in uncertainty, to trust that currents, however disorienting, will eventually meet land again. The ice may break, the sea may widen, but the will to continue, to hold on until a new shore appears, remains. And so, like the bear, we learn to rest upon what carries us, even when direction is lost, trusting that movement itself is part of survival. In water and air, spirals form where energy gathers. A vortex pulls everything toward its center, currents twisting downward in rivers, whirlwinds rising skyward in storms. To watch one is to see both beauty and danger, a pattern of motion that seems endless, feeding on itself, growing stronger the longer it spins. The spiral of a vortex is not random but inevitable, a shape born whenever force and flow meet without balance. Human ambition often moves in the same way. What begins as a single desire can start to circle, gathering momentum with every thought, every action. The wish for recognition, for wealth, for mastery, draws in time, energy, and sometimes even those around us, until life itself is caught in the current. Ambition can lift like a whirlwind, carrying people higher than they imagined. It can also consume, narrowing focus until nothing remains but the chase itself. Ancient cultures often saw spirals as symbols of power. In Celtic carvings, the triple spiral suggested both growth and energy cycling without end. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, swirling mandalas mirrored the movements of the cosmos and the mind, both expansive and consuming. Myths of whirlpools swallowing ships or storms scattering armies spoke not only of nature's force but of the dangers of unchecked desire, ambition turned into obsession. Science explains vortices as natural outcomes of imbalance. Differences in pressure, temperature, or flow create the twist, and once begun, the spiral sustains itself until the energy is released. Human ambition follows a similar path. It arises when tension exists between where we are and where we long to be. That difference fuels the spin. Sometimes it creates innovation, art, discovery. Other times, it narrows into a destructive pull, drawing everything into its center. The spiral of vortexes reminds us that ambition is neither good nor ill by itself. It is energy, capable of shaping lives, carrying us forward, or pulling us under. What matters is not to stop the spiral, but to learn when to ride its currents, and when to step back from the pull. In the morning light, a web glimmers as though strung with glass. Tiny droplets of dew cling to the silk, scattering sunlight into flashes of silver. What appears beautiful is also dangerous. Many spiders weave threads that reflect light in ways insects mistake for open air or for the shimmer of flowers. Drawn toward brightness, The unsuspecting creature flies straight into the web, where delicate silk becomes an unbreakable snare. Biologists have studied these reflections closely. Some species spin ultraviolet patterns that mimic blossoms, invisible to the human eye but irresistible to pollinators. Others rely on the simple brilliance of wet silk, catching the attention of prey that would otherwise pass by unnoticed. The spider does not chase, does not roar, does not pursue. Instead, it waits, letting light itself become the lure. Human lives are filled with reflections just as alluring. Shiny advertisements, polished promises, and glowing screens draw attention, offering what appears beautiful or essential. Yet often these reflections conceal traps, commitments that bind, desires that entangle, obligations that grow tighter the more one struggles against them. Like insects in the web, people sometimes find themselves caught not by force, but by attraction. History provides endless examples of such lures. Golden coins once dazzled merchants into debts they could not escape. Ornate palaces tempted courtiers into intrigues beyond their control. Even in modern times, promises of quick success or effortless gain pull countless lives into invisible snares. The shimmer that first seemed harmless becomes a net of dependence, difficult to leave behind. The paradox of the reflection trap is its dual nature: beauty and danger, promise and peril. The web gleams because it is real silk, real light, nothing false in its design. Yet its purpose is hidden, its beauty a tool of survival. In this, the spider's web mirrors human worlds of attraction and entanglement, reminding us that not every shimmer leads to freedom. Some lights illuminate paths, others, cages. In the summer air, bees move tirelessly among blossoms, gathering nectar and carrying pollen from flower to flower. Their work sustains not only the hive but entire ecosystems, feeding orchards, fields, and forests. Yet beneath this rhythm of labor lies a darker truth. When threatened, the honeybee defends with a sting that becomes its own undoing. The barb catches, the body tears, and the bee dies soon after. Protection of the hive comes at the cost of the self. For ancient peoples, this sacrifice was never overlooked. The Greeks spoke of bees as symbols of loyalty and service, creatures who gave their lives for the health of the community. In Celtic myth, bees carried messages between the living and the dead, their stings reminders of the fine line between life's sweetness and its dangers. Medieval monks, watching hives in monastery gardens, compared bees to faithful servants of God, small lives surrendered for the greater good. Modern science explains the sacrifice with precision. Honeybees' barbed stingers evolved to pierce the skin of mammals, clinging so tightly that retreat becomes impossible. The act of stinging ensures that the venom is delivered deeply, maximizing its effect on intruders. Though fatal to the bee, it protects the colony, where thousands of sisters and the queen depend on safety. Survival of the group outweighs survival of one. In human life, the parallel is striking. History is filled with individuals who gave themselves for causes larger than their own lives. Soldiers defending their communities, reformers challenging injustice, parents sacrificing quietly for their children. Like the bee, their actions may cost dearly, yet the legacy sustains those who remain. The bee's sacrifice reminds us that existence is not only measured in duration but in devotion. A brief life can carry vast meaning when given in service. In the hum of the hive, as in the hum of humanity, sacrifice is both burden and bond. Along steep cliffs, where rock faces plunge sharply into sea or valley, birds choose to build their nests. To the human eye, the choice seems strange, even reckless. Gusting winds, sheer drops, and the constant threat of falling surround their fragile homes. Yet for the birds, this dangerous perch is safety itself. Predators find it nearly impossible to climb, and the exposed location gives clear sight of approaching threats. Danger, in this paradox, becomes protection. Ornithologists studying seabirds, gulls, puffins, and kittiwakes have long observed this behavior. The birds wedge grass and twigs into narrow ledges, raising chicks on patches of stone only a body's width across. From below, it appears precarious, as if a strong wind could sweep everything away. But year after year, the colonies return, proving that survival sometimes depends not on avoiding risk, but on choosing it wisely. There is a reflection here for human life. People, too, often seek security in places that appear unstable to others. Families migrate across uncertain lands for the promise of safety. Individuals take risks in love, in work, in belief, stepping into uncertainty for the sake of something more lasting. The paradox is the same as the birds. What looks perilous may, in truth, be the surest protection. Cultures across time have told stories of sanctuary found in unlikely places. Fortresses built on cliffs, monasteries perched high on mountainsides, entire villages clinging to stone ridges. Like the nests of birds, these human choices embrace danger to find peace. So when you picture a cliff lined with small white birds, their cries carried on the wind, imagine the quiet wisdom of their choice. What seems exposed is, in fact, secure. What seems fragile endures. In both bird and human life, safety is not always where the ground feels steady. It is sometimes found where the air is thin, the edge sharp, and the paradox unavoidable. Imagine a riverbank at midday, the water slow and heavy beneath the sun. At the edge, a crocodile rests, almost indistinguishable from the mud around it. Its eyes alone break the stillness, unblinking, fixed. To an untrained glance, it might seem lifeless, a log caught in the reeds. Yet this stillness is not sleep, it is strategy. The crocodile waits, conserving energy, allowing the world to come to it. For centuries, people living near great rivers told stories of this patience. Hunters and fishermen learned to respect the animal's silence, for they knew sudden movement would follow. Ancient cultures carved crocodiles into stone and myth, seeing in them both danger and wisdom, the ability to endure without rushing. Imagine yourself by such a river, aware of the weight of silence, knowing that within it lies hidden strength. In human life, strategy often mirrors this stillness. We sit with choices, gather information, and hold ourselves steady when others rush. From the outside, such waiting can appear passive, but within it lies careful attention, reading the situation, measuring the moment. Like the crocodile, we prepare not by constant motion but by conserving, by choosing when to act. The crocodile's stillness reminds us that movement is most powerful when it is rare, when it follows long patience. To wait is not to waste, it is to sharpen focus, to let the world reveal itself before we strike. And when the time comes, the action is swift, decisive, final, shaped not by restlessness but by restraint. In this way, stillness itself becomes a form of power, a reminder that sometimes the most deliberate path is the one held longest in silence. After rain, the forest floor changes overnight. Where there was only damp soil, mushrooms appear in clusters, rising quickly in pale shapes that seem almost unreal. Their growth is sudden, but it is not spontaneous. Beneath the ground lies a vast network of mycelium, thin, branching threads that stretch silently through the earth, carrying signals, sharing nutrients, and waiting for the right conditions to reveal themselves above the surface. The bloom is only the visible tip of something much older, deeper, and connected. Human culture shows a similar rhythm. Ideas spread unseen, moving through conversations, stories, and gestures, until suddenly they surface everywhere at once. A song, a phrase, a custom, once obscure, becomes shared by thousands, then millions. Like mushrooms after rain, cultural trends appear suddenly, yet they are rooted in networks of connection that have been building quietly all along. Ancient societies noticed the mystery of fungi. In Egypt, mushrooms were called the food of immortality, reserved for the tables of pharaohs. In Mesoamerican traditions, they were linked to visions and altered states, believed to connect humans to the spirit world. Their sudden appearance, without seed or flower, made them seem otherworldly, a reminder that not all growth is visible until the moment it blooms. Science now reveals how fungal networks weave forests together. A tree in shade may receive nutrients through the mycelium from one in sunlight. Signals of danger, drought, insects, disease, travel through the same threads. The mushroom's sudden bloom is the visible sign of an invisible web, as much communication as creation. Human trends follow the same pattern. A new thought, long circulating quietly in private spaces, suddenly becomes visible in public life. What seems like instant growth is often the flowering of connections that have been forming silently for years. The mushroom bloom reminds us that what rises quickly often rests on what was long hidden. Beneath every sudden surge, whether of nature or culture, there lies a web of unseen ties, patiently waiting for the moment to emerge. When the sun sinks and shadows lengthen, another world begins to stir. Owls glide from hidden perches, their wings cutting silently through the dusk. Bats unfurl themselves from caves and rafters, stitching the air with erratic patterns. Moths rise from grass and hedges, drawn toward the faintest flicker of light. To many animals, night is not absence but opportunity. The eclipse of daylight does not end life, it rearranges it. Owls, with eyes adapted to dimness, can spot the faintest twitch of movement in grass. Bats, using echoes instead of sight, hunt in perfect darkness. Each creature has shaped itself to shadow, finding in secrecy what daylight denies. To emerge at night is to move in a realm of hidden strengths, where silence and invisibility become tools of survival. Human beings, though bound largely to the day, have long shared an affinity with the hours after sunset. History remembers secret societies meeting by candlelight, scholars studying in midnight silence, and rebels gathering under cover of darkness. Even today, some thrive in night's rhythm. Workers, artists, thinkers whose creativity awakens when the world grows quiet. Like owls and bats, they find freedom in obscurity, moving where fewer eyes are watching. Cultures have often regarded night creatures with awe or suspicion. Owls were seen as omens in Greece, guardians of wisdom yet also harbingers of death. Bats became symbols of both mystery and fear, their wings woven into myths of transformation. The paradox lies in their duality. Feared for their secrecy, yet admired for their mastery of what others cannot navigate. The eclipse of night creatures reminds us that life does not belong only to the light. In shadow, new rhythms take shape, voices rise that cannot be heard in brightness, and survival depends on skills unseen. For both animal and human, darkness offers not only concealment but also possibility. A space where silence becomes strength and secrecy becomes a kind of freedom. At the heart of a sunflower, a quiet geometry unfolds. The seeds do not scatter at random but arrange themselves in spirals that seem endless, curling outward with remarkable precision. Look closely, and you see patterns flowing left and right, weaving a design that is both intricate and inevitable. This is not chance, but a natural order, shaped by mathematics hidden in growth. Across cultures, such spirals have carried symbolic weight. Ancient Greeks saw in them the golden ratio, a proportion they believed reflected harmony in art, architecture, and the body itself. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, spirals echoed the unfolding of the cosmos, the steady turning of life from one form to another. Even in medieval Europe, scholars copied diagrams of spirals in manuscripts, convinced that nature's order mirrored divine intention. Modern science explains the sunflower's design through efficiency. Each new seed emerges at a specific angle, ensuring that space is filled evenly without waste. This angle, close to the golden ratio, produces interlocking spirals that maximize both beauty and function. What looks like art is, in fact, survival, an elegant way to gather the most sunlight, the most nourishment, the most life. Yet beyond numbers and diagrams, the spiral carries a quieter meaning. Human beings, too, search for patterns, seeking order in the midst of uncertainty, weaving meaning from events that might otherwise seem scattered. The spiral of seeds reminds us that order often emerges not from force but from steady growth, each step built upon the last, turning outward into possibility. To hold a sunflower head in your hand is to glimpse this balance, nature's instinct for harmony, mathematics expressed as life, and the echo of our own pursuit of order. In its spirals, we see not only the logic of the seed, but the longing of the human mind to find structure in the chaos. When a flock of birds takes to the sky, their movement appears almost effortless. Hundreds of wings beat in unison, turning sharply, gliding smoothly, as if guided by a single thought. Yet within this collective flight, a leader emerges. Not by command, not by decree, but through movement itself. The bird that takes the forward position breaks the wind for the others, easing their passage. When it tires, another takes its place, and the cycle continues. Leadership here is not permanent but fluid, shared in rhythm with the needs of the flock. Scientists studying geese and starlings have traced this phenomenon. In the V-shaped formation of migrating birds, the leader provides both direction and energy savings. The flock follows the angle of its wings, catching the currents it creates. Yet when fatigue comes, the leader drifts back, allowing another to step forward. What appears as hierarchy is, in truth, cooperation. The flock survives not because of one bird alone, but because leadership is passed along when needed. There is a human parallel in this quiet exchange. In times of calm, leadership may remain unnoticed. But in moments of crisis, when storms gather, when direction is uncertain, someone steps to the front. It may not be the strongest or the loudest, but the one whose movement inspires others to follow. And when their strength wanes, another rises, carrying the burden for a time. Like birds in flight, human communities depend not only on leaders, but on the willingness to share leadership, to step forward when the moment calls, and to step back when others must guide. Cultures have long drawn lessons from flocks. Ancient storytellers saw them as symbols of unity, of guidance, of the wisdom of shared purpose. To watch them wheel across the sky is to see a living metaphor of how groups endure, through cooperation, through shifting roles, through trust. So when you see a flock moving as one, remember that its leader is not chosen once and forever. Leadership rises, fades, and returns in cycles, just as it does among people. Born from need, sustained by trust, and passed on when the time is right. Imagine a river swollen by days of rain. At first, the current only quickens, carrying twigs and leaves downstream. But slowly the banks give way, and the water spills outward, no longer contained by its usual boundaries. Fields disappear beneath its surface, paths vanish, and what was once calm and predictable becomes overwhelming. The flood does not ask permission. It arrives, sudden and unstoppable, reshaping the land in its passage. Communities across history have lived with this cycle. Ancient farmers along the Nile or the Indus depended on floods for renewal, even as they feared their destruction. Myths often described rivers as living beings with tempers, capable of both generosity and ruin. Imagine yourself standing near such a river, hearing its roar, watching the water spread into places it does not belong. The air itself feels charged, heavy with the force of something usually hidden now fully unleashed. In human life, emotions sometimes rise in the same way. A word, a memory, or a moment too heavy to contain can swell within us, spilling beyond the boundaries we try to maintain. Anger, grief, joy, each can overflow, reshaping conversations, relationships, even entire chapters of our lives. Like the river, what we carry inside is not always steady. At times it breaks through, revealing both our fragility and our depth. The river's flood teaches that overflow is not only loss. Though it disrupts and unsettles, it also clears, nourishes, and makes space for new growth. The land, once drained, carries richer soil. The person, once released, carries lighter burdens. To flood is not to fail. It is to remind us that containment has limits, and that sometimes release, even in its turbulence, is necessary for renewal. Across the stillness of night, the sound of a wolf's howl travels for miles. It rises and falls like a song, echoing through valleys, crossing forests, carried on air to ears unseen. To the lone wolf, it is a call to the pack. To the pack, it is a signal of presence, of territory, of belonging. The howl is both warning and invitation, a voice stretching into darkness to say, "I am here, and you are not alone." Human life carries the same impulse. From the earliest days, people used drums, horns, and chants to send messages across distance. Fires on hilltops warned of invasion, church bells marked the hours, and songs carried in markets bound communities together. Even today, phones and radios, messages and broadcasts, all are echoes of that same need, to extend the self outward, to bridge the silence between one place and another. Cultures have long recognized the wolf's howl as something more than sound. In Native American traditions, it was often seen as a symbol of guidance and spirit, a reminder of the bond between the individual and the group. In Northern Europe, tales describe the howl as a voice of wilderness itself, both haunting and holy. Wherever wolves lived, their calls were never just noise, they were threads binding landscape, creature, and story. Science explains the howl as communication finely tuned. Wolves adjust pitch and rhythm so their voices do not blend, ensuring each member of the pack is heard distinctly. Together, the chorus forms a harmony that carries farther than any single voice could alone. Humans mirror this in choirs, chants, and gatherings, where many voices, though different, become one shared sound. The wolf's howl reminds us that connection is both survival and comfort. To send a voice into the night is to resist isolation, to affirm that we belong to something larger. Like wolves under the moon, humans call out, not only to be heard, but to be answered. When storms gather, the sky becomes a stage for sudden brilliance. A bolt of lightning leaps from cloud to ground, splitting the air with a jagged line of light. Rarely is it a single stroke. Branches spread from the main channel, splitting into smaller paths, each reaching for the earth in its own direction. To the eye, the strike is over in an instant, yet within that moment, countless decisions are made, air conducting here, resistance forming there, until a final path emerges. Physicists explain lightning as a negotiation of charges. Invisible currents search through the sky for the easiest route, branching and testing until one channel prevails. The forks that seem chaotic are records of possibilities. Paths begun, then abandoned, as the bolt finds its way. In this way, lightning is not simply a strike, but a branching exploration, a search for connection in the quickest possible instant. Human lives carry an echo of this sudden fracturing. At certain moments, a choice divides into many directions. A word spoken or left unsaid, a journey taken or refused, an alliance formed or broken. Each possibility seems alive for a brief moment, stretching forward like a lightning branch. But once a decision is made, one path brightens, while the others fade into memory, unrealized but never forgotten. Literature often turns to lightning as a symbol for fate, brilliant, violent, and irreversible. Ancient myths saw it as the weapon of gods, a sign of authority that decided lives in a single flash. Yet beneath the awe and fear lies a quieter truth. Lightning, like choice, is shaped by hidden conditions. The strike we see is the result of countless unseen forces aligning in silence before the burst. The paradox of the split path is that it is both random and inevitable. Lightning chooses in a fraction of a second, yet its choice is guided by laws older than memory. Human decisions feel free, yet are shaped by histories, contexts, and forces we barely perceive. In both sky and life, the branching paths remind us that every flash carries within it the shadow of what might have been. High in the mountains, where air thins and silence reigns, glaciers move with a pace so slow it escapes notice. To the eye, they seem frozen in place, eternal blocks of ice pressed into valleys. Yet year after year, snow compacts, ice thickens, and gravity pulls the mass forward. Rocks grind beneath, valleys carve wider, and entire landscapes are reshaped by this quiet, unhurried force. What appears still is, in truth, always moving. Ancient peoples sensed this hidden power without measuring it. Norse sagas spoke of great frozen rivers creeping toward villages, swallowing farmland with an inevitability that no prayer could halt. In the Alps, legends grew around glacier spirits, said to punish those who disrespected the mountains. To live near such ice was to live with the reminder that nature's slow hand always prevailed. Modern science explains the glacier's progress in detail. Pressure causes ice at the base to soften, flowing like a liquid, carrying with it stones and soil. Over centuries, this movement gouges valleys, shapes fjords, and leaves behind ridges of rock that tell stories of ancient paths. The rate may be only centimeters each day, yet across millennia the changes are vast, entire landscapes rewritten in silence. The glacier offers a mirror for human life. Change within us often feels invisible in the moment, but across decades, it reshapes who we are. Habits, choices, and quiet shifts of thought accumulate like layers of snow, pressing into something more enduring. We notice the difference only when we look back and see how far we have come. The glacier's slow creep teaches patience. Transformation does not need to be sudden to be powerful. Like the ice-shaping valleys, human change moves quietly but surely, altering the course of a lifetime with steady, unstoppable force. Stand among trees on a quiet day, and you will hear more than silence. Branches bend, leaves tremble, grasses sway, all moved by something unseen. The wind itself is invisible, yet its presence is known in the way it shapes what it touches. Over years, trees lean in its direction, their trunks curved, their crowns sculpted by the constant pressure. Landscapes become records of its passage, written not in stone but in the bend of living things. For centuries, people have watched the wind as both mystery and messenger. Sailors once relied on it to cross oceans, while farmers read its shifts to predict weather. In myths, wind often carried voices, whispers of gods, omens, or warnings across the land. Always it is unseen, yet always it leaves a mark. There is a human reflection here. Gossip moves much like wind, unseen, intangible, yet shaping lives and communities. A whispered word, light as air, drifts from one person to another. Like a breeze bending branches, it alters reputations, tilts relationships, and sometimes reshapes entire groups. What begins softly can grow into a gale, sweeping through workplaces, families, or villages, leaving traces long after the words themselves are forgotten. Yet not all whispers carry harm. Just as wind can scatter seeds, spreading growth where none was before, words too can plant connection, encouragement, kindness, reassurance spoken quietly but remembered deeply. The same invisible force can erode or can nurture, depending on how it is carried. So when you hear the wind moving through trees, imagine it as more than air in motion. See it as a mirror of our own unseen exchanges, the words that shape us without weight or form. Both wind and whisper remind us that what cannot be seen can still leave deep impressions, on landscapes, on lives, on the quiet fabric of community. Imagine an owl perched in silence, its body held still against the branch. The forest around it is shadowed, filled with rustles too faint for most ears. Without moving its body, the owl turns its head, slowly, deliberately, farther than seems possible. Nearly full circle, the gaze shifts, and with it the world itself is reframed. The bird does not rush. Its strength lies in patience and in vision that reaches where ordinary sight cannot. For centuries, people have been fascinated by this turning. Ancient Greeks carved owls into coins as symbols of wisdom, while others believed the bird could see into hidden realms. Hunters and storytellers alike spoke of the way an owl could notice what others missed, its watchfulness both eerie and admirable. Imagine yourself beneath such a gaze, knowing that nothing escapes its quiet attention. In human life, perspective shifts can be just as powerful. We often fix our view in one direction, convinced that what we see is all there is. Yet when circumstances force us to turn, through new experiences, challenges, or unexpected encounters, we discover angles we had never considered. Like the owl, we cannot move the world itself, but by changing how we look at it, the world changes for us. The owl's head turn reminds us that wisdom is less about knowing everything and more about seeing differently. To pause, to rotate our view, to let new angles into our sight, these are quiet acts of transformation. Just as the owl surveys its forest without leaving its perch, so too can we expand our vision without leaving where we are. A shift in perspective is not escape, It is clarity, and sometimes the simplest turn reveals the widest horizon. On warm summer nights, the air comes alive with small points of light. Fireflies drift through grass and trees, their bodies pulsing with soft flashes. To the human eye, it may look like a dance of chance, but each pattern carries meaning. The light is a signal, sometimes an invitation, sometimes a reply, a conversation written not in words but in brief sparks of glow. For the firefly, light is language. Humans, too, have long used signals to bridge distance and uncertainty. A glance held across a room, a gesture of the hand, a lantern in a window, all are ways of saying what words might fail to capture. Courtship especially has always carried such unspoken messages. Fans held at a certain angle in old Europe, flowers chosen carefully in Victorian times, songs hummed beneath balconies. Like the firefly's glow, these signals were fleeting, yet they carried weight, weaving meaning out of small, repeated gestures. Cultures often saw fireflies as more than insects. In Japanese poetry, they were symbols of love's brief spark, fragile yet luminous against the night. In some Native American traditions, they represented guidance, small lanterns leading travelers through darkness. Their light was never merely physical. It was emotional, spiritual, a reminder of how fragile brilliance can still illuminate. Science explains that each species of firefly has its own rhythm, a coded pattern that allows mates to find one another. Some flash in duets, others in waves that sweep across fields like a living constellation. The precision ensures recognition, just as human signals carry meaning only within shared understanding. Without context, a flash is only light. With context, it becomes communication. The firefly's signal reminds us that even the smallest gesture can bridge distance. A smile, a glance, a word left unspoken yet understood, these are lights in the human night. Fragile, brief, but powerful enough to connect one being to another, across silence and darkness alike. High in the mountains, silence often hides a fragile balance. Snow piles layer upon layer through the long winter, each drift resting upon the weight of those before it. To the eye, the slope appears solid, eternal. Yet within, cracks form, small shifts where ice loosens or pressure builds unseen. A single sound, a gust of wind, or the step of a lone traveler may be enough to release the weight. What seemed steady becomes motion, a white cascade rushing downward in unstoppable force. Avalanches are not accidents but processes. Scientists describe them as thresholds reached, where the mountain can hold no more. Minute changes, variations in temperature, the angle of the slope, the subtle texture of snow crystals, decide whether stillness endures or collapse begins. In one moment, stability holds. In the next, the slope releases centuries of silence in a roar. Human lives often mirror this hidden tension. People carry burdens that build quietly over time. Unspoken worries, unresolved conflicts, accumulated fatigue. Outwardly, they may appear composed, calm as a winter slope. But beneath, fractures widen. A minor word, a missed promise, a sudden memory. Small triggers can release what has long been contained. The breakdown may seem sudden, yet it is born of countless hidden layers pressed together over years. Histories, too, are marked by avalanche moments. Empires collapse after centuries of pressure, released by a single event, a revolt, an assassination, a failed harvest. What looks like a sudden fall is often the surface crack of a much deeper weight. Writers have long noted this rhythm, comparing human breakdowns, both personal and collective, to the falling of snow that once seemed eternal. The paradox of the avalanche is that collapse is both destruction and renewal. Forests buried by snow are later nourished by meltwater. Valleys reshaped by falls carry new rivers. In the same way, human breakdowns, though painful, sometimes clear paths for change, forcing lives or societies to reorder themselves. The fall is terrifying, but it is also a release, a return to motion after long silence. Across deserts and shorelines, wind draws patterns in the sand. Tiny grains, each insignificant alone, are gathered and shaped into ripples that stretch across the ground. These ridges appear orderly, repeating in waves, yet they are formed not by plan but by pressure, air currents guiding countless particles into shared direction. What seems fragile becomes a lasting mark of movement. For ancient travelers crossing deserts, these ripples were more than scenery. Bedouins read them as silent maps, signs of where the wind had come from and where storms might rise again. In Japanese gardens, raked sand imitated the same patterns, turning natural ripples into symbols of calm and order. Across cultures, the site suggested a deeper truth. Even the smallest elements follow when shaped by larger forces. Science describes the process with clarity. When wind reaches a certain speed, it lifts grains of sand into motion. They bounce and fall, pushing others along, until ridges form at regular intervals. Each ripple is the product of interaction, grain influencing grain, gust influencing gust. The pattern holds across scales, from dunes hundreds of feet high to the faint ridges left by a breeze along a riverbank. The image resonates with human life. Individuals, like grains, are often shaped by the currents of groups around them, communities, cultures, crowds. Beliefs, habits, and choices ripple outward, spreading through influence more than command. A single voice may seem small, but together, patterns emerge that guide entire societies. To look at the sand's ripple is to be reminded that we, too, are carried by invisible currents. The marks they leave may appear delicate, yet they endure, reshaping landscapes of thought and behavior. Just as the wind leaves its signature on the desert floor, human influence writes its patterns across generations. The human eye, they appear unchanging. Yet every star carries within it the seeds of its own end. For the most massive, that ending comes in the form of a supernova, an explosion so powerful it outshines entire galaxies for a brief time. In that moment, a star's long, quiet existence concludes with brilliance, scattering its matter across space. Astronomers tell us that supernovae are not merely destruction. They are also creation. The heavy elements that make up planets, oceans, and even the iron in human blood were forged in the hearts of stars and released through their explosive deaths. What looks like a violent ending is, in truth, the beginning of everything we know. Out of collapse comes dispersal, out of silence, a dazzling flare. There is a human reflection in this pattern. Some lives end not quietly, but with sudden intensity. A dramatic departure from a community, a powerful final act, or words spoken at the end of a life can echo long after the person is gone. Like a supernova, the brightness may be brief, but its influence lingers. What is scattered are memories, ideas, or legacies that seed the lives of others. Cultures have long looked upward and drawn meaning from these cosmic events. Ancient records describe guest stars that appeared suddenly in the sky, burning bright for weeks before fading into darkness. To those who saw them, they were omens or divine signs. To us, they are reminders that even endings carry the possibility of renewal. So when you imagine a star's supernova, think of more than light collapsing into night. See instead the paradox of its brilliance, that an ending can also be a gift, that what burns away may leave behind the elements for new worlds to form. In both the heavens and in human life, final acts can resonate longer than all that came before. Imagine a spider's web stretched between branches, a delicate spiral of silk glistening in the light. From the outer edges, threads radiate outward in wide arcs, yet the spider always returns to the center. It moves along the spiral, outward to repair, outward to wait, outward to test, but again and again, it drifts back to that middle point. The center is where stillness resides, where the web's vibrations converge, where safety and awareness are strongest. People have long been captivated by this spiral pattern. Ancient myths spoke of the web as a symbol of creation, each strand a path leading back to origin. Weaving cultures saw in the spider's spiral a lesson about craft and patience, a reminder that all journeys, no matter how far, circle toward a center. Imagine yourself watching such a web, every line leading inward, as if the world itself were quietly reminding you where home lies. In human life, we, too, return to our own centers. No matter how far we travel, no matter how wide our experiences stretch, there is a place, or a feeling, that calls us back. Sometimes it is a physical home, a room that carries familiar scents and sounds. Sometimes it is a memory, a ritual, or a person whose presence restores us. Like the spider, we may move outward into the uncertain edges of life, but we circle back to what anchors us. The spider's spiral center reminds us that belonging is not only about where we live, but about where we return. Home is less a fixed location than a point of rest within the web of our lives. To return to center is to find balance again, to touch the threads that connect us, to feel that even as the world shifts, there remains a place where we are held. Across plains and forests, the chase unfolds. A predator fixes its gaze, muscles coil, and then it runs, not in reckless speed alone, but with patience and strategy. Some prey outpace the hunter in bursts, yet the predator endures, pressing forward with steady rhythm. It is not always the fastest that succeeds, but the one who refuses to stop. The chase is persistence made visible, a living thread between hunger and survival. Human ambition often mirrors this rhythm. Great works are rarely won in sudden bursts of brilliance. They are pursued through effort repeated day after day, like footfalls that refuse to falter. An artist returns to the canvas, a scholar to the page, a traveler to the road, each moving closer through steady pursuit. The predator's chase is echoed in every human struggle where the goal lies just ahead, never easily caught, yet impossible to abandon. Ancient cultures understood this pattern. Hunters in early societies trained not only in weapons but in endurance, knowing that persistence was the true measure of success. Myths often cast heroes as relentless seekers, Odysseus striving for home, Gilgamesh chasing immortality, pilgrims walking toward sacred sites despite obstacles. Each story carried the same truth: pursuit defines us as much as achievement. Science observes that predators rely on efficiency as much as speed. Wolves and lions conserve energy, taking turns or circling prey until the moment arrives. Humans, too, survive not through single feats but through coordination, patience, and the will to continue. Persistence itself becomes the strategy, ensuring that even if the first attempt fails, the chase remains. The predator's chase reminds us that ambition is not a sprint but a pursuit measured in endurance. Whether for survival, creation, or discovery, what matters most is not the instant of success but the refusal to stop running. In the rhythm of each step lies the promise that, eventually, the distance will close. In winter, lakes and rivers harden into a surface that appears unshakable. The frozen sheet stretches smooth and silent, holding the weight of snow, branches, and sometimes even travelers. Yet beneath the stillness lies water, restless and shifting. A sudden drop in temperature, the pressure of footsteps, or the slow widening of hidden fractures can send a sharp sound across the silence, a crack that echoes longer than the eye can follow. Scientists describe these cracks as the release of tension. Ice expands and contracts with changing temperatures, building invisible stress until it gives way. The sound carries for miles, amplified by the frozen surface, a reminder that what appears whole is often already threaded with weakness. Each echo is both warning and revelation. The surface may look solid, but its strength is never absolute. Human trust bears a similar fragility. Relationships, built carefully over time, can seem unbreakable on the surface. Yet small tensions gather beneath, unspoken doubts, forgotten promises, subtle betrayals. One moment may be enough to release them. A careless word, a broken confidence, a gesture of neglect, these are the weight of footsteps on thin ice. When the crack comes, it is often sudden, carrying the sound of fractures that have been forming silently all along. Literature and history carry countless examples of this delicate tension. Alliances between kingdoms splintered with a single act of betrayal. Friendships unraveled not through great conflict, but through quiet accumulation of strain. Like the frozen lake, what seemed to endure collapsed with a sound that echoed far beyond the moment itself. The paradox of ice, and of trust, is that both strength and fragility exist together. solid enough to carry life, yet vulnerable to the slightest change. When cracks form, they do not erase what once was strong. They reveal how much depended on balance. The echo that follows is not only a sign of breaking, but also a reminder. What is most enduring is also what must be most carefully tended. On summer nights, moths appear as silent wanderers, drifting through the dark on fragile wings. Yet place a flame nearby, and they will circle closer and closer, drawn to the glow as if compelled by an unseen force. For many, this simple image carries weight. Delicate lives lured toward danger, beauty entangled with risk. The moth becomes not just an insect of the night, but a symbol of attraction to what can harm. Ancient writers noticed the same mystery. In Greek poetry, moths fluttering to lamps were compared to human souls drawn toward passion and destruction. In Persian verse, the moth's embrace of fire became an image of love so consuming it erased the self. Across Asia, stories often described moths as phoenix-like creatures, reborn in the flame, transformed in their sacrifice. To watch them fall into light was to glimpse the paradox of desire and loss entwined. Science explains the behavior differently. Moths navigate by celestial light, keeping a steady angle to the moon or stars. Artificial flames and lamps disrupt this method, pulling them into spirals that end in collision. Their peril is not choice but instinct misled, guidance designed for the sky betrayed by new sources of light. What seems like longing is, in truth, confusion. Yet the image endures because it mirrors us. Humans, too, are drawn toward risks that shimmer with promise. Ventures, passions, decisions that carry both beauty and danger. At times, the very forces that guide us can lead astray, pulling us into patterns we do not escape. And still, without risk, there is no transformation, no fire to illuminate the night. The phoenix moth reminds us that attraction and peril often share the same flame. To circle close is to risk being burned, yet also to seek light in darkness, a choice as old as life itself. Look closely at a fern leaf. Its fronds divide into smaller fronds, each one echoing the shape of the whole. Shift your gaze to the branching of rivers seen from above, or to the delicate veins of a lung. Then look farther still, at the spiral arms of galaxies, or the clustering of cosmic webs across space. At every scale, patterns repeat. What is vast resembles what is small. This is the fractal nature of the universe. Shapes within shapes, echoes across time and size. Mathematicians use the word fractal to describe patterns that recur endlessly, each part containing the form of the whole. But long before the term was invented, humans sensed this repetition. Ancient builders carved spirals and branching forms into temples, while mystics spoke of the body as a mirror of the cosmos. To them, the correspondence between micro and macro was not coincidence, but a sign of unity, that everything belonged to the same design. There is a human reflection here. Our stories, though lived on an intimate scale, repeat in the larger structures of civilization. Families grow like branches of a tree, generations spiraling outward. Communities spread like river deltas, dividing and rejoining. Even the smallest choices ripple outward, echoing across networks we cannot see. Each life is a pattern within larger patterns, both unique and repeating. Fractals remind us that complexity can arise from simple rules, and that even the most intricate forms are built from repetition. In this way, the universe itself seems to whisper that meaning is not confined to one scale of being. The same rhythms shape atoms, forests, cities, and galaxies. So when you trace the spiral of a shell or gaze at the sweep of a galaxy, imagine them as mirrors, reflections of a larger truth. The universe, in all its vastness, is not distant from us. It is patterned within us, repeated in the folds of our lungs, the lines of our hands, the stories of our lives.